Okay, well, welcome to this evening's event. My name is Mark Allison. I'm the Manager of Strategic Initiatives and Sustainability with the city, and I'll be the moderator for tonight's event. And my role here is to get us starting and to give you an outline of what's coming up tonight, and then we'll get on with the rest of the program. So tonight we are going to have a number of components. The first will be some introductory remarks and some welcoming remarks. We're going to have a little bit of information about the project itself. We are going to have some perspectives, various perspectives on energy and pipelines and the environment and other issues related to the TransMountain Pipeline proposal. After that, it's the Town Hall. It's your turn. It's why we're here tonight, actually, and that's to hear from you. So at that point, we'll be turning it over to you, and we're going to be asking for questions of our panelists, or statements, comments, concerns you have, anything that's on your mind. And we have a number of ways to do that. One way is through these comment cards. So if you don't have these, we can get these to you. We have two people who will be roving up and down through the event who are not anywhere in sight at the moment. Where are they? I will track them down. And this is one way you can ask a question or make a comment. If you don't feel comfortable coming to one of our mics, we'll have two microphones during that period that will be running up and down the aisles, and you can ask a verbal question, you can make a statement. We also, you should all have been given a comment form. And again, the reason for this is to hear from you, to help us, the city, in our process, our review process, to find out what's on the minds of our community, get as many answers as we can, and use that in our submission to the National Energy Board when time comes to make our final submission and presentation. There also, of course, is a number of ways that you will see. Let me introduce first our panel. So you see, it's quite a diverse panel we have tonight. We have industry folks, we have people from fire and rescue services and environmental services. We have Lee Kuhnfer from the Canadian Association of Petroleum Producers. We're in the news a lot these days with oil prices and whatnot. They have a lot on their plate. Lee, even though he is totally under the weather, has come out tonight. So Lee, when he speaks, he's going to speak, and then we're going to take questions specifically for Lee, and we're going to let him get home and get better, go to bed and get better after that. Okay, Andrew Murray is with the New Westminster Environmental Partners. Elaine Pacheco is from the Canadian Energy Pipeline Association. Dr. Heather Bears is working with the city consulting team, working on preparing information requests and helping us with our submission to the National Energy Board. Chief Tim Armstrong is from our Fire and Rescue Services. He'll be providing a perspective on emergency response and safety. And finally, we're going to have what I know is going to be an excellent address from Elmer Rudolph. He's going to tell us about the rebirth of the Burnett River. Okay. So for those of you who are wired, and for those of you at home watching on New West TV, here's how you can get in touch with us. If you're in the audience, we have public Wi-Fi here. So look for City Public Wi-Fi, and you can either tweet or you can post on our Facebook page. And if you want to make a comment on this town hall meeting or any time you have interest in the pipeline, use the hashtag #PipelineNW. We have tonight Ashley over here is with our communications department, and she's going to be monitoring tweets as well as your comment cards, and she's going to be bringing them from time to time during the town hall session to our attention. So those of you at home, we look forward to hearing your input as well, and we'll be bringing those to the town hall meeting. So now I'd like to introduce Mayor Jonathan Cote, who's no stranger to anyone, I'm sure, in the room. Jonathan is our newly elected mayor, and he's going to provide some introductory remarks. Jonathan.
Well, thank you. Good evening and welcome, everyone. I really appreciate everyone taking the time to come out and participate in our town hall meeting this evening. Our purpose this evening really is for the citizens of New Westminster to really develop a better understanding of Kinder Morgan's TransMountain Pipeline expansion plan, and also an opportunity for members of the public to express their views and comments regarding this proposal. Now, we have with us this evening a number of elected officials. We have our Member of Parliament, Finn Donnelly. Member of Parliament Peter Julian isn't here at the moment, but he will be arriving a little bit later. We also have our MLA, Judy Darcy. And we've got the majority of New Westminster City Council here, so enough for quorum, and we could probably make some decisions if we need to. Councillor Bill Harper. Councillor Chuck Puckmeyer. Councillor Jamie McAvoy. And Councillor Laurie Williams. And Councillor Patrick Johnson. As you can see, our elected officials in our community care very much about this proposal and are certainly very interested and a keen interest to making sure that the community is involved. Now, we are very fortunate tonight to have a panel of highly knowledgeable experts that will bring forward a range of perspectives and opinions from economic, technical, social, and environmental perspectives, all needed to really better understand the issue that we're dealing with here. I'd also like to in particular give thank you to representatives from the Canadian Association of Petroleum Producers and the Canadian Energy Pipeline Association who've traveled here from outside of New Westminster to show their role of the energy sector in Canada's economy and about the industry's practices. Now, I need to point out this evening that the pipeline proponent, Kinder Morgan, and the pipeline regulator, the National Energy Board, declined our invitation to be a part of this evening. So, although we do have some representatives from the economy sector, the people here, when you are asking questions, are not speaking on behalf of Kinder Morgan. So, I just want to make sure that everyone is aware of that. So I encourage everyone to certainly enjoy the information that we're going to be getting and to participate in the later segments. And certainly the information that we'll be gathering tonight will assist the City of New Westminster as we move forward in providing our thoughts and opinions on this issue. So thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Mayor Cote. Next on our agenda, we have the co-chair of our Environmental Advisory Committee, Jamie McAvoy, who's been with the Environmental Advisory Committee for a long time giving guidance, and now he pairs with Councillor Johnson as co-chairs of that committee, so a real powerhouse in charge of our committee now. And Jamie is going to give us an overview of the project. Thank you.
Good evening. As I speak tonight, there will be some slides showing over there as well. I'm Councillor Jamie McAvoy, co-chair with Patrick Johnstone of the City's Environment Advisory Committee. It means a lot to our City Council colleagues and the provincial and federal representatives here tonight to see so many people come out at this event on such an important topic. The pipeline proposal impacts a number of city policies, including the official community plan, the Brunette Creek Neighborhood Plan, and New Westminster's Envision 2032 Sustainability Framework. Each of these underscore the importance of reducing our dependence on non-renewable fossil fuels and the related emissions over time, and the preservation and enhancement of open space and natural areas. Envision 2032, the city's sustainability framework, makes a clear statement on the importance of rivers and watershed to our community, noting that in the future, key sensitive ecosystems in the city are protected and are being restored, while parks, natural areas, and other green areas, including yards, are gradually increasing their biodiversity and habitat value. Our sustainability framework also speaks specifically about the Brunette and Fraser River watersheds, saying that the habitat and recreation value of local waters and wetlands, including the Brunette and Fraser Rivers, is being restored. Streams are being daylighted, and industrial waterfront properties are continually reducing their impacts on the foreshore. The City of New Westminster and our partners have worked hard for many years to restore the highly sensitive Brunette River watershed back to health. As environmental stewards of the river, we owe it to future generations to ensure that everything necessary is being done to protect this fragile ecosystem. It takes collaboration and hard work, as far as we have, due to the efforts of groups such as Metro Vancouver and the Sapperton Fish and Game Club. The Brunette River has gone from being a biologically dead watercourse to thousands of fish spawning each year. But our efforts can't end there. The river's ecosystems are still fragile, and the stream restoration work undertaken over the past 4 decades could be undone with a single major industrial accident. This brings us to why we are here tonight. In December 2013, Kinder Morgan applied to the National Energy Board for permission to construct an expanded TransMountain Pipeline between Alberta and its storage facility on Burnaby Mountain for export from the West Ridge Marine Terminal in Burnaby. The proposed expansion would cost over $5 billion, roughly triple the capacity of the 1,000-kilometer pipeline, and could transport a variety of petroleum products, including diluted bitumen from northern Alberta's oil sands. The pipeline originates in Edmonton and runs through the Rocky Mountains into BC's interior to the Fraser Valley, crossing numerous rivers and streams along its route. The proposed route includes some original right-of-way and new corridors, in addition to potential alternative corridors and temporary use areas. Today, the pipeline crosses the Fraser River from Surrey to Coquitlam, and then runs through central Burnaby and Coquitlam, which is the black line that you see on this slide. The current proposal is to cross the river further upstream and run south of the existing pipeline route. Kinder Morgan's proposal is that the pipeline would run through the Brunette River watershed, shared by Coquitlam, Burnaby, and New Westminster, and in some locations, such as Hume Park in the Braid Industrial Area, very close to the Brunette River, as shown in the yellow on the slide. The city naturally has some serious concerns with this. In addition to construction impacts and risks to local properties, the Brunette River alignment could lead to potentially catastrophic environmental impacts on the Brunette and Fraser River ecosystems in the event of a pipeline failure. Late last year, the city was granted intervenor status in the National Energy Board's review process, as we needed to ensure New Westminster interests, particularly safety and the protection of local businesses and ecosystems, were represented during this review. In the new federal review process, the environmental impact assessment for the project has been passed from the Canadian Environmental Assessment Agency to the National Energy Board. Under the new process, there is a fixed 14-month review period, and there are specific criteria for participating in the process as an intervener. The exchange of information is mostly by written documents, and there is no opportunity for interveners to cross-examine either the proponent or the NEB. The city has recently submitted the second of 2 permitted information requests, which our environmental consultant will discuss later, and Kinder Morgan will need to provide answers to these by the end of February. The city will then take all of the response information provided, along with other sources, including feedback from this town hall meeting, to prepare a written submission on the proposal with our arguments to the National Energy Board in May. The city's oral presentation with our arguments will be in September, before the board makes its final decision in early 2016. Clearly, it's important that we hear from our community members tonight about your concerns so that we can bring these to the NEB's attention in our submission and presentation. As Mayor Cote noted, we are fortunate this evening to have an expert panel who will inform us about the Canadian energy industry, pipeline safety practices, environmental issues related to fossil fuel use, and local habitat and ecological values. I'm looking forward to the panelists' presentations and to the discussion period that follows this evening. Your questions and comments are important and invaluable to this process. I thank you for being here, and please be respectful of each other. Be hard on the issues, but not hard on the people. And don't be shy. We need to hear from you. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor McAvoy. We're going to have our speakers. They're going to come up here. If you wouldn't mind coming up to the mic, we have our web streaming here. They're going to be recording the event, and this, I think, is the best place for them to focus in on our speakers. So first up, we have Lee Kuhnfer, who's with the Canadian Association of Petroleum Producers, who has been quite a bit in the news lately, of course, with the world oil prices and their effect on the Canadian economy. Lee is the BC British Columbia Communications Advisor for the oil sands for the Canadian Association of Petroleum Producers. Prior to this, he was Vice President of Public Relations for Ledcor, which many of us know is one of Canada's largest construction companies, which also has interests in the oil sands industry and pipeline sectors. He has over 15 years of experience in the natural resources sector, working in both forestry and mining. He also worked for various ministries and the federal government in Ottawa. Lee has a BA in political science from the University of British Columbia and an MBA from Queen's University. Please help me in welcoming Lee.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm very appreciative of the opportunity to come here and speak with you tonight. My apologies that my presentation is going to be brief, and I appreciate your accommodation, Mark, of allowing me to go home and drown myself in NyQuil and Neocitrin. I have to be quick. I've just noticed I've run out of Kleenex. As Mark mentioned, I represent the Canadian Association of Petroleum Producers. We're the national umbrella organization that represents upstream producers, those who actually extract the resource from the oil sands, whether it be through in situ wells or mining, which comprises 20% of that activity. So our member companies would be those companies who would use and do use the TransMountain Pipeline. I don't know if many of you know, but when we talk about Canada's energy sector, particularly the oil and gas sector, we're a significant player on the global arena. We have the third largest oil reserves in the world. We produce approximately 3.4 million barrels of oil a day, 2.5 million barrels of which roughly 66% is exported. So Canada is a self-sufficient nation as far as our crude oil needs are concerned. The remainder of that product primarily goes to the US. It is essentially a bilateral trade arrangement. The resource is transported to domestically and to the US market primarily through three means. Of course, the preferable, which is pipeline. There's also rail options and, of course, marine. To use the rail and marine options, however, you do need a pipeline infrastructure. So at the end of the day, pipelines are key. Currently, the pipeline systems that we use are at capacity, whether it be through Keystone, which runs north-south through the central part of the US, of course, TransMountain, and pipelines going to eastern to Ontario. Our marine capacity right now, we have 200 visits a year of oil tankers into the Port Metro Vancouver. We've had 50 years operation without incident. Currently, and not many people know this, but we export 580 million barrels of oil, have left Canadian seaports, whether eastern or western, all without incident, and I think that's a track record that we need to be proud of, and I think it's a track record that is reflective of the efforts of everyone on the marine safety side and our emergency services systems. An important factor that we need to consider is that there's 150,000 people directly employed by the oil sands sector here in Canada. That number more than doubles when you consider the 2,000 suppliers who help support that sector. 614 of those suppliers are here, reside here in BC. The oil and gas sector contributes approximately $1.3 billion a year to the BC government from fees, levies, taxes, etc. That doesn't even include the tertiary benefits of the employees who work and spend their money in the local economies. If we look forward in our forecasting, there'll be approximately $180 billion in industrial investments over the next 20 years in Canada alone. And that's a significant number when you look at other relative industrial activities in Canada. There's no doubt about it, the oil and gas sector is a significant contributor. The dilemma that our industry is facing right now is that, as I mentioned earlier, we're in a bilateral trade agreement with the US. As they become more self-sufficient, they're not going to require our oil products. And that's just a nature of the economic reality. So logic would dictate that you search for other markets. Those markets are in the Pacific Rim. Those markets are further down into Central America, etc. In order to do that and to actually capture those markets, you need the infrastructure to do so. And that's where pipelines come in, and that's the rationale for a pipeline expansion. Having been involved in the forest sector, as much as we are a very reliable, efficient, and highly environmentally responsible supplier to the US, having one customer doesn't always make good business sense. The softwood lumber agreement has taught us that. And again, that's just a reality of economic business in the global marketplace. So we need to look for other markets. If we were to go into the Pacific Rim, as I was saying, the projects such as the TransMountain expansion project is going to facilitate that. And in order to, for our industry to remain robust, we need the infrastructure to accommodate that. We already are, I would argue, probably the world's leading producer of oil sand, of crude oil resources in the world. We're one of the most highly regulated industries in the world, and we have a track record that speaks for itself, and I think could stand up against any other jurisdiction. And when I look at the industry, just from the economic contributing factors, this industry is not only a solid operator, a responsible operator, but if I was to put dollars to the equation, this industry does a great deal to support the infrastructures of this country, of this province, and the city of New Westminster, for example, in schools, hospitals, and other critical structures that we need in order to enjoy the quality of life we have. I do make a point every time I'm out in the field to shake the hands of the people that work in the sector. I'm not the guy out there on the line, building the pipelines, or being a rig hand at a well. But I sure do appreciate the work that they do, and I'm grateful for that. Hopefully later I don't need to avail myself of the hospital with this cold. But it's something that from my opinion, I'm very proud of the industry. And if I was to have growing economies around the world who require crude oil, which they do, the demand is growing, and that's just a fact. I would much rather it be Canadian product that they're using rather than the product from other jurisdictions who don't have responsible environment legislation, perhaps, political stability that we enjoy and sometimes take for granted here in Canada. So again, I'm just speaking on behalf of the industry sector as a whole. We are not the proponents of the project, but of course our members are excited about the opportunity, and we're also excited about the potential of the industry. But town halls like this are what makes the projects sustainable and credible in the public eye. So I do thank you for your time. Again, my apologies. I've given all my information to Mark, and don't hesitate to contact me. Thanks.
Thank you, Lee. Lee's agreed to answer a few questions before he staggers off to bed with his NyQuil. Do we have any questions from the audience? Any comment forms? They're being very kind to you. This is very good. Okay, we have one question. We'll take one question.
When you say without incidents?
Well, where's our Jennifer and Blair? Where are you? Our roving mic people are.
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you.
You said that there have been no incidences of I think you were alluding to spills in these pipelines.
No, the comment I made was around the marine transportation. There's been 50 years of operations without reportable incident in that regard. I recognize there's incidents in the pipelines, and that's just an unfortunate reality. I will say this, is that our sector is working very hard with our colleagues from the Pipeline Association to make sure that our already remarkable record relative to other sectors is improved upon. Continuous improvement is the name of the game. If you don't do that, you're quickly out of business, and our sector doesn't shy away from that.
Okay, I think Councillor Puckmeyer had a question. Then we'll go up here.
There was recently a CBC report on pipeline fractures and spills just in British Columbia. It took a lot of research after the FOIs to actually drill into what really the information was. And I found it quite alarming at the number of releases of gas and releases of oil in pipelines in British Columbia. Do you foresee an increase of that as the pipeline infrastructure is beginning to age?
Myself personally, I'll say no. That being said, I'm not a technical expert. Our representatives from SEPA, if they're
I can respond.
Might be able to provide a more accurate response.
Are the mics working?
Are the mics working?
Yeah. Oh, sorry, yeah.
We have aging infrastructure. There's quite a number of pipelines already in the ground for some time now. Those are being addressed with technology and new corrosion techniques and corrosion inhibition techniques, as well as leak detection and studies and quite a number of advances in technology to limit and achieve a goal of zero incidents in the pipeline industry. Those are being addressed as an industry, and recognizing the fact that we have been using pipelines for a number of years, and they are aging.
Great. We had a question up here, I think. And if you could please use the microphone, so we're recording the event, so it would help us for posterity to know what you asked.
Yes, I just wanted to make a comment on no incidents. Perhaps it didn't originate in BC, but it certainly impacted a significant portion of the BC coast, 91 Nestucca. It was a barge, and I was involved in the cleanup, and it was very significant, and there are probably lasting impacts from that. And it was very disorganized in terms of the cleanup effort. So that was my comment.
And again, I acknowledge that incident. It was a tragic incident, and you're right, it was mishandled, no doubt about it. What I will say is that as a result of that, changes have been made. Again, it goes back to that model of continuous improvement. I don't think anyone can say that they're going to go into an activity where there'll be a zero incident. What we need to do is act as responsibly as we can, conduct ourselves as responsibly as we can, to make sure that we learn from every event that does happen, no matter, regardless of how minor the incident. That one was a significant one, for sure. No, it wasn't a Canadian operator. It did impact our waters. There's been legislation now that has been put in place to help make sure that type of event doesn't occur again, and also to mitigate any impacts. Again, all I can say is that to the project that we're talking about here, the activity and the way the marine industry and our industry has conducted ourselves is quite remarkable in my eyes. And I think that as long as we continue that in the continuous improvement framework and mindset, that we are going to be in good stead to make sure that those types of events don't occur in the future. Okay, but so I do acknowledge that there are.
For our audience, these are two, this is Jennifer and Blair. They are going to be your microphone people. So since I got this bright light in my eyes, if you could let them know, signal to them, they're going to be keeping a little speakers list. We're going to go a left-right kind of thing. And if you do have a written question, you can also give it to them, and we'll get it up here to get that read out. Okay, so we had a question over on the far left, and then we'll go to this lady here.
Yeah, a few weeks ago, my name is Al Engler. A few weeks ago, the first reports that carbon emissions had exceeded 400 parts per million ever were made. The Kyoto Accord in 1995 said that if we are to avoid environmental catastrophe, they should be the parts per million should be below 350. They've just exceeded 400. I want to know who, if any of us, are responsible for making sure that we don't go through catastrophic climate change.
I think that question probably goes to everyone, but we'll tackle that during the panel discussion later. Are there specific questions for Lee on the industry and the presentation that he made? Jen?
Thank you. Lee, I was just wondering what the position of your association is on adding more value to the resource within Canada. And I too come from the forest industry, and it seems to me that exporting crude oil is kind of like shipping logs out of the country. And some of my experience in the forest industry is convincing a community to sign on to and support the cutting down of trees. And I found a major advantage was when you could show maximum economic benefit within the community or within a jurisdiction, you then start to get broad public support. Shipping logs out of the country doesn't usually encourage people to support cutting them down, and I wonder if the same mightn't apply to the oil industry.
That's an excellent question. And no, I remember my days in the forest sector. Value add, value add, value add was the motto. The oil and gas sector is a bit different in that regard, because what we don't recognize is that there is a lot, much more value add work, if I could call it that, in the extraction of the resource. So there are a number of things that we do, and we do well in Canada as far as that goes. Like anything, that old adage of John Keynes, I think it was, you move to the food or whatever. You take the resource and it moves to where there's refining capacity. And I believe that's what you were talking about, is why don't we have more refineries here in Canada? It's a good question. It's a matter of capital. And in these markets, capital isn't flowing that easily into greenfield projects refining that provide refining capacity are very, very capital intensive. We do have a small infrastructure in Canada, which is maxed out. Right now, our resource goes to where there is refining capacity already, where countries have made, or companies have made those investments in the refining capacity. Is there that appetite here? Yeah, there's proponents here in BC right now as we speak who are making those proposals. And if they're approved and they find the capital on the open markets, I say great. In the meantime, we have to work with what we have, and the resource will go in that form.
Thanks. Blair.
We have a question over here. Excuse me.
Thank you. So I noticed in your presentation you talked about how many jobs will be created and how a spill has never happened with your company. But I've seen recent studies that have come out in the Vancouver Sun saying that the number of jobs that your company is predicting has been vastly overstated by a factor of 10. And also that a cost of a spill, how it's calculated, is through a series of assumptions. And all of the assumptions that your company used were almost falsified, because the idea that a day can be 24 hours of daylight is wrong. It cannot happen. So I guess my question is a two-parter. One, if, considering the amount of public opposition that they've been seeing in Burnaby and other places around here, if every single person in this no, not Town Hall, wider than that. Yeah, the sort of the NEB process, thank you. The NEB process was against this project. Would you actually shut it down? And secondly, because of the poor track record of your reports being accurate at all, why should we trust you?
Now, I should point out that Lee is from the Canadian Association of Petroleum Producers and not Kinder Morgan. Was your question directed at Kinder Morgan?
I represent the industry association. Just for the record, my company has 85 people in it, and I wanted to remind the audience that I did bring some collateral materials on marine transportation specifically, but also on the oil sands. All of the figures in here are cited. I believe, and I'm just trying to, because I'm not certain, I believe that some are from StatsCan. So if they're inaccurate, we have bigger issues than what we're talking about here. But some may be coming from our industry, and again, my information is available, and I would be more than happy to sit down and go over those with you.
But we'll take that concern for the record. I should mention that Lauren over here from our City Clerk's Department is recording all the proceedings. So at the end of this, we'll be having a written transcript of all the comments that were made. So comments, for example, is the employment study exaggerated, will come to us, and that's things that staff will look at in our submission later on. Thank you very much. Jennifer, we have someone up there.
Hi, you mentioned Canadian operators, but these oil operators typically work multinationally as well. I mean, so I'm not sure where the distinction is. If they're multinational, it's not really relevant if they're Canadian. And my other question is, what constitutes a reportable incident?
Okay, to the first part of your question, like any major industrial sector, multinational companies are at play. Yes, there are purely Canadian operators. A majority, I would suggest, are multinationals. However, they're operating within the Canadian jurisdiction. Therefore, as far as I'm concerned, you're operating in Canada, you're operating on Canadian rules. It's a Canadian operating entity on Canadian soil, for that matter. So that's how I constitute a Canadian operator. Whether or not they're multinational or not, to me, it doesn't matter. If you're operating in my backyard, you're operating by my rules. You're operating to the standards that we set. And the resource you're extracting is ours. It's a Canadian resource. And that's how I define Canadian operator. And sorry, the second question?
It was what is the level at which an incident is reportable? Yes.
I don't know what Environment Canada, the standards that they set, but what I was referring to is that there is no documentation as far as an incident, as far as marine transportation. So there is nothing on record which would require a report. I don't know what that level is. I can absolutely clarify it for you. I can get that information to Mark.
It might come out as well in Elaine's presentation.
It might,
since
yeah.
she is,
there are other people on the panel who might be able to answer that better than I am. I'm sorry about that.
Great. Any other specific questions for Lee before we let him go?
Sorry, I think he had a backup. Sorry, did you have?
Hi. Yeah, I have a question. You mentioned a specific dollar value as to the direct contribution from your association. Or from the petroleum producers.
Right.
What percentage of the provincial government, of a provincial budget is that?
That's an excellent question. I know the federal level, it's over 10%. We're the largest contributor.
Provincial.
I'm sorry, I'm trying to recall. I would imagine it would be very comparable, but I would suggest that we are probably the largest contributor in the province. As far as fees, levies, taxes, so as part of the GDP, we would be the largest.
Okay, and Jennifer, we have one more over here, and I think we'll let
Just a quick comment after that.
Oh, then one quick comment, and we'll let Lee go.
Good evening. First, I have a point, and then I have a question. The first point being the risk of pipeline spills, one would think is directly related to the amount of pipelines within a region or a country, and obviously the volume of oil or bitumen that these pipelines are transporting. So using Canadian examples at this point can be a bit misleading when you look at the stats in the US. Within the last 20 years, there's been about $6.5 billion in property damages related to pipeline spills. Within each of those years, there's been approximately 250 pipeline spills per year, not going below 220 per year. The cost of cleanup of pipeline spills in the States has increased substantially since pipelines started to transport bitumen from the Canadian oil sands, the biggest example being Kalamazoo. So I think that's something that's important to keep in mind when we start talking about increasing the amount of pipelines in this country, the volume at which these pipelines are going to be transporting, and the associated risks with that. My question to you is, we often hear of the ethical oil argument from the industry. Would we rather oil come from Canada, which has a political stability and really robust environmental regulations, although that's arguable now, compared to Saudi Arabia or some other country? My question to you is, how do you feel about selling to countries such as China that have very questionable human rights records, that have very low, if negligible, environmental standards, and have very politically unstable environments? It seems to be a bit of a double standard.
Good question. I will comment on your first comment about pipelines. I don't think there is a direct correlation to more product going through pipelines leads to more spills, or at the same rate. And again, I can be corrected, but if you were to go into other jurisdictions that don't have the standards that we have, their spills are much higher. And they may have 5 miles of pipe, but 5 tons of spills. So I would suggest that our regulations and our standards actually keep us at a very high level. That doesn't necessarily mean that, and you're absolutely right, more pipelines could lead to more spills. That is a possibility for sure. On the ethical argument, I have my own personal views on that. However, that is up to the end user or company who takes that product and sells it on the market. It's up to our international trade minister as to whether or not there are embargoes. And I do trust the entities and the regulators to make sure that there is some rhyme, reason, some sensibility brought to the equation about where this product goes. Absolutely. Do I think that there are other growing economies around the world that have questionable human rights track records? Should they be brought under the microscope? Absolutely. And again, personally, I believe that, and I'm sure that some, or if not all, of our member companies take that into the equation. Ultimately, the decision is theirs, and that is the free market hand of the economy. And I have my own personal beliefs on it, though, as well.
And I think we have one final comment over here.
Hi, my comment is you keep talking about incidents and events. To me, an event usually involves a cup of tea or a glass of wine with a lot of good friends and like-minded people. An event, that's an event. An incident may be heated argument or discussion. I finally heard you say the word spill. I think what all of us are concerned about is spills, breakage, and leaks, and contamination. And until we can hear you guys actually talk about that, because we all know what happens, we'd appreciate that rather than just events. Thank you.
Great. I'll take that as a comment. Patrick did have his hand up earlier. I have to admit, we overlooked him earlier, so we're not going to overlook him this time.
Hi, thank you for your presentation. You finished with one phrase. You talked about how events like this help with the sustainable development of your industry. And you can answer this personally or for your company or for your organization. How do you define sustainability?
How do I define sustainability? What was it? Gro Harlem Brundtland, the former premier of Sweden, in the book Our Common Future, has an excellent example, or an excellent definition. I just wish I could remember it so I could sound really intelligent. How I define sustainable is a company that's able to carry out its business, its operation, that is both within the purview of regulations of what is required. I say at the bare minimum, meaning that, ideally exceeding that, but also with the tacit support of the community around it. There has to be that engagement of the community. And I learned that lesson over and over again in the forest sector. And maybe I am bringing some of my own personal beliefs in, but it's an absolute requirement. And people throw around that term social license too freely, I think. But there is a requirement there to earn a trust. And you will never have the trust of 100% of the population. If we get to that point one day, hallelujah, great. But I don't think that'll ever happen. But that's all the dynamic of public debate. And that opposition that is likely always going to be there actually helps swing the pendulum, actually helps move legislation. Because, let's face it, history has shown us time and time again that industries aren't the most progressive entities in the world. You need that kick in the pants to move. And again, I'll bring it back to the forest sector from my experience there. A lot of the environmental legislation, the sustainable forestry practices were brought about through town halls like this. And that's why I didn't want to miss this. I wanted to show up and infect everybody with my flu. But I thought, and I do apologize for this, but I think this is important. I really do. And I appreciate the opportunity to be here.
And we thank you for being here. Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot. And again,
there's literature outside. Later on after the presentation, you can grab some of the information that Lee has brought. Also, we'll be providing a link on our website to all of the sources of information that you're hearing tonight.
Thank you again, everybody.
Thank you. Okay, so now what we're going to do is we're going to go through our speakers, have each one, if this works, there we go. We're going to go through our remaining 5 speakers and have them give their perspective, and then we're going to take questions from both sides for any of the speakers at the table or comments that you have on what you've heard. Okay. Our next speaker is Andrew Murray, who's with the New Westminster Environmental Partners, who's been active. How long have the New Westminster Environmental Partners been active now in New West?
8 years.
8 years. And we got to see a number of folks here from that organization. But Andrew has lived in New Westminster for over 20 years and is a longtime community activist. Besides being one of the original founding members of the New Westminster Environmental Partners, you might not know that he was one of the founders of the New West Farmers Market. He was, and the Dock Fest, which I've volunteered for in the past. It goes every year. I put a little plug in for that. In 2009, he was Citizen of the Year nominee, and 2013, he was the recipient of the Queen's Diamond Jubilee Award. Please help me welcome Andrew Murray.
Thanks, Mark, and thank you for coming out. First of all, I'd like to thank the sponsors, Judy Darcy, Finn Donnelly, and Peter Julian up there. Hello, Peter. I'm going to give you a totally different perspective. First of all, we believe that when you're exporting raw bitumen, you're exporting greenhouse gas emissions, but equally importantly, you're exporting Canadian jobs. We want that value added to go to Canadians, not somebody on the other side of the world. As far as the jobs go, we have 2 sets of numbers to go by. We have, during that 2-year construction period, we've got the Conference Board of Canada saying there's going to be 36,000 person years of employment. The SFU Goodman report says only 12,000. So there's considerable disparity there. On the spin-off jobs, you've got 2,000 from the Conference Board and 800 from the Goodman. And once the dust settles, you're stuck, you've got 50 permanent jobs on a $5 billion project. One of the things that I would like to throw into that mix are comments by Robin Allen, a very respected economist and former CEO of ICBC. She feels that due to a federal government decision in 2012 that the Chevron refinery, which has 250 good-paying union jobs, may have to shut down. Chevron in 2012 applied to the federal government for preferred status on the new pipeline. And that pipeline, that Chevron refinery, provides most of our gasoline, about 40% of the fuel for YVR. And the federal government said no, they rejected that application. So now Chevron has got to be finding ways to find product to bring to the refinery to meet our own domestic needs. So that's in jeopardy, and I don't think too many people are aware of that. Taxes. This project, in terms of provincial and municipal taxes, is probably going to deliver about $26.5 million a year for 36 years. Not an overwhelming number, but Kinder Morgan's not really fond of paying taxes. Robin Allen, again, has looked into their past 5 years of operation in this province, and on average revenues of $170 million a year, they paid $1.5 million in taxes. How do you get a rate like that? I mean, where do you sign up for that? I'm in. You know, so what I'd really like to discuss is the environmental issues here. So we've got the Brunette River. Elmer's going to discuss that. So what I want to focus on is the tank farm in Burnaby and the Westridge Marine Terminal. Now the tank farm in Burnaby is a 1950s piece of infrastructure. It's got 13 tanks. It's going to double into 26 tanks on the same size property, and that's going to hold 3.6 million barrels of raw bitumen. We feel that putting a tank farm on the side of a mountain in an earthquake zone is unacceptable. The Deputy Fire Chief of Burnaby, Chris Bocock, has spoken publicly about his concerns. He worked for 15 years in the tar sands. He knows oil and he knows fires. His concern is if any kind of a major fire incident happens there, his firefighters will not be able to get in and get it. There's going to be less than 50 feet between each tank. And so his concern is that fire could burn out of control for 4 to 7 days. Folks, this is a huge public safety issue. Those are toxic fumes. We're talking about evacuation in possibly the tens of thousands of people. In Kalamazoo, Michigan, they evacuated everybody within 1 mile circumference of that spill. Now, that's a densely populated area. Simon Fraser, the condominiums there, the $1 million homes, everybody would have to be out of there. There's a forest above that, the protected area. So there's some huge public, as far as we're concerned, that alone should stop this project in its tracks. We don't think a tank farm in 2015 should be situated on the side of a mountain in an earthquake zone. We believe it should be on flat ground in a remote area where they can do the least amount of damage. The Westridge Marine Terminal. Currently, there's about 5 or 6 tankers per month squeezing under that First Narrows Bridge, squeezing under the railway bridge, and picking up oil products from Kinder Morgan's terminal there. Recently, a group of professional engineers, calling themselves concerned professional engineers, have pointed out how dangerous this is. This is a much more dangerous way of a marine channel than actually the Douglas Channel up in Kitimat moving Enbridge. I think we should be listening to people like these concerned professional engineers and the deputy fire chief. We think the response for spill response is going to be woefully inadequate. Western Canada Marine Response is set up to deal with small spills at terminals and conventional oil. They think they're going to be able to boom it and then scoop it off, not with diluted bitumen. We learned that in Kalamazoo. It sinks. Their standard is, I believe it's 72 hours for a 10,000-ton spill. Within 3 days, we believe that diluted bitumen will have already sunk. So totally ineffective. The federal government, the 2010 Auditor General said that there should be a spill analysis done on the West Coast. It's 5 years later, it hasn't been done. I think that speaks volumes about the political will to actually create any kind of a world-class spill response that would be promised. It's just not going to be there. Kinder Morgan itself. Kinder Morgan bought Terrace and Gas in 2005. Kinder Morgan is Richard Kinder and William Morgan, former Enron employees, the smartest guys in the room. But they bought Enron's pipeline infrastructure before the company went down. And in 2013, the Wall Street Journal asked the question, in a blaring headline, said, Wall Street concerned about Kinder Morgan's safety record. And underneath it, it said, Wall Street Journal is asked the question, is Kinder Morgan scrimping on pipeline safety? And the reason they asked those questions, because prior 2004 to 2013, it's just one series of ruptures, explosions, worker deaths, five workers incinerated in one explosion in California in 2005, charges of using second-rate steel, poor welding, poor safety inspection, and deferred maintenance. We would argue that Kinder Morgan, with its record here in the past few years, plus its record in the USA, has not earned the social license to manage a project of this magnitude in our province. We're being asked to accept this project in the national interest. When I hear Stephen Harper and Joe Oliver talk about the national interest, I don't think they're talking about you. I don't think they're talking about me. I think they're talking about Alberta, the oil and gas industry, the banks that finance the projects. I think they're talking about Bay Street, Wall Street, hedge funds, foreign investors, but I don't think they're talking about us. So I think we have an obligation to act as British Columbians first, protect our coastline. It supports 168,000 jobs, has incredible potential for future renewable energy and clean technologies, and it's just simply not worth the risk. Now, the National Energy Board process, we think, is being corrupted by the Harper Conservatives. We think any process that lets the proponent pick and choose what questions they want to answer, any process which doesn't allow interveners to cross-examine the proponent, is a flawed process. And we just saw Mark Ellison, the CEO, former CEO of BC Hydro, walk away calling it a sham. And it is a sham. And any laws that come out of that will not be just. And in the words of Thomas Jefferson, if a law is deemed unjust, resistance becomes duty. And I hope British Columbians will continue to resist this project every step of the way. Thank you.
I want to clarify that was Mark Eilison from BC Hydro, not Mark Allison, your moderator tonight, who's completely neutral. Okay. Thanks, Andrew. Okay, next, make it thicker. There we go. So next, we have a lot of questions on pipelines, and I imagine Elaine's going to get quite a few later, but I'll give you her bio. She's got quite a good history here. Elaine's with the Canadian Energy Pipeline Association. She's a director of safety for the association, and leads the development of Canadian pipeline industry's overarching safety and sustainability development programs. Her role includes developing industry performance indicators and frameworks for SEPA's member companies and supporting the SEPA Integrity First program and its goal of improving the industry's performance in public safety, pipeline integrity, and environmental stewardship. Please help me welcome Elaine Pacheco.
Good evening, everyone. I hope you can entertain some of my slide presentation here. I guess we're the only one providing it this evening. It's a pleasure to be here. My name is Elaine Pacheco. I'm the Director of Safety with the Canadian Energy Pipeline Association. Tonight, I'm here on behalf of SEPA, not to advocate for any of our members, but or their projects, but instead to speak to you about pipelines and pipeline safety, and offer an objective, credible voice that speaks to the facts and provide you with some information. I don't wish to change any opinions or beliefs, only perhaps to educate and provide that information and enhance your understanding about pipelines, safety, and the industry as a whole. Who is SEPA? SEPA is our association, and it represents Canada's transmission pipelines company. Our vision is clearly to make sure that our industry is safe and socially responsible and environmentally sustainable. Our mission is to continually enhance the operating excellence, business environment, and recognize responsibility of our industry. SEPA's focus is to be a credible and trusted voice in the industry. We consider ourselves a part of industry, but apart from it. So SEPA itself has 12 member companies. While most of our member pipelines are federally regulated under the NEB, they also operate in a number of provincial jurisdictions, so there's a number of challenges and complexities in terms of how we work with those various regulatory bodies and that we're privileged to work under. Just a little bit more about pipelines. The transmission pipeline industry is very highly regulated, and we welcome that regulations. We believe that strong regulatory oversight and adherence to those policies are key. As you can see here, SEPA's member companies transport approximately 97% of the oil and natural gas produced in Canada, amounting to around 22% of the value of Canada's merchandise exports. It's quite a significant industry. But what's really key here, and I want you to note, is that we have a very proud operating history spanning over 60 years. From a local perspective, British Columbia has approximately 9,000 kilometers of pipeline that have existed for many years. These pipelines have contributed to employment opportunities for British Columbians and to community investment as well as local procurements. From an economic perspective, a variety of factors can be ignored. Market access and trade are key drivers to pipeline infrastructure, obviously. Access to new markets will likely position Canada as a strategic supplier of oil and gas to international market. We also want to make note that oil and gas utilities and pipeline represent over 23% of the equity capital raised on the Toronto Stock Exchange. Only 20% of the total world oil reserves are accessible for private sector investments. As well, with the economic context, we can't ignore the social and political context as well. We're very aware that there's unprecedented public and stakeholder interest and resistance and mistrust of industrial development. We are also faced with some global challenges surrounding climate change, a growing population, and an increase in energy needs that leads to frustration and some mistrust in information. There is a heightened public sensitivity as well, fueled by the media attention, a lack of context. Obviously, the pipelines have been out for many years. Many of them are out of sight, out of mind, and difficulty in seeing some of those clear paths to solutions. So in response to those socio-political factors, we recognize that trust must be an essential foundation of our industry. We are absolutely committed to building that trust and building those relationships to achieve that. So how do you dissect such a complex concept such as trust? This is a formula that we use to work with our member companies as well as industry. You see credibility up there. It is obviously key, but not only do we have to have the knowledge and the skills to do our job as an industry, we also have to be reliable, do the things we say we do, and perhaps the most important thing here in this equation is intimacy, and that's the quality of the relationship with the people we touch and on a day in and a day out basis. For our industry, that reinforces the fact that we must build that trust by building relationship and continuously nurturing it. There are several things that we can do to achieve that. One way is through SEPA's Integrity First program. That is an industry-wide program developed by SEPA and its member companies to work collaboratively to deliver energy products reliably, safely, and socially and environmentally responsible manner. It's focused on advancing the performance of the Canadian energy pipeline industry with the goal of reaching zero incidents. The program itself provides SEPA members with the guidance to improve upon their management system and key practices on priority issues. One of the things that we're doing to do that is actually through some projects that we've done, developing guidance documents around pipeline integrity, emergency management, control room management, the Land Agent Code of Conduct, and specifically right now on watercourse impact and damage prevention. These guidelines are developed by subject matter experts from SEPA member companies, and they use that in collaboration with each other to determine leading practices and processes in a priority area, and they use that to enhance their performance. Wanted to note that these practices and guidelines are developed to surpass any regulatory requirements that's required federally or provincially. And this is done voluntarily in the effort to enhance performance. I wanted to talk about the Land Agent Code of Conduct. That's an initiative that we have where member companies are committed to strong positive relationship with people that are affected by their operations as well as their projects. Similarly, the watercourse impact and damage prevention guidelines are being developed to address concerns around construction and operations of these lines around water crossings. Some of the projects that we've completed to date, and in an effort to collaborate around continuous improvement, focus on mutual aid or mutual emergency assistance agreements, the development of incident command systems, as well as the development of new standards to help us manage buried pipeline infrastructure. We take protection of water bodies very seriously. All these companies regularly conduct spill response exercise in water under both the summer condition as well as the winter conditions in all types of water bodies. Our members have conducted studies on how oil would disperse in land and in water in case of a pipeline incident. One of the things that we've done as well in collaboration with the industry is to conduct an emergency management exercise where our members participated to test the agreement that they put together that's already in practice is the Mutual Emergency Assistance Agreement. And that's an agreement that formalizes and legalizes the existing practices that they have, where once company's incident is everyone's incident. Allowing any one of the SEPA member companies to ask for assistance from another member company during a spill, or the resources like equipment, personnel, and specialized response advice is shared among the member companies. So it's, if one could say that this exercise back in the fall of 2014, it was a very transparent event. Regulators, media, government, first responders were all invited to witness this activation of the MEAA. There's quite a number of folks that came to see the actual incident command system as well as the equipment that we use in spill response. So with pipelines, the major concern is really safety and its operations. We can always address spill response thereafter, but during the operation of the pipeline, safety is a critical factor. Safety and environment protection are top of mind. It is the essence of the life cycle. Every portion of the life cycle of the pipeline is regulated and committed to all the decisions made around design, planning, construction, operations, and maintenance. All these are highly regulated and subscribed to the Z662 standard. They are committed to minimizing the impacts and risks to the public and to the environment at every stage. We wanted to also say that during the entire cycle of the pipeline, we support the BC government's 5 condition and the recent changes to the Pipeline Safety Act, especially around developing a framework that focuses on spill prevention, emergency response and preparedness, and liability and compensation. We also fully support the polluter principle that will require companies operating major crude oil pipelines to have a minimum of $1 billion in financial capacity to respond to leaks, spills, and rupture. And of course, the National Energy Board that compels us to adhere to payments to the provinces, federal departments, the First Nation, and municipalities for all of the spill responses and liability. Pipeline integrity management is a systematic approach that we use to manage the safety of the pipeline. For example, we look at valve placement in strategic ways. We evaluate terrain, wildlife habitat, and water properties to determine the optimal placement of valves. There's actually operations. In operations, we look at new technologies in leak detection to enhance response time. There's new technologies to there's new technologies in fiber optics that's being tested, so we can monitor the pipeline, so we can have an enhanced response time as well. So over the last half a century, we've come a long way in making significant advancements in coding, testing, corrosion monitoring to ensure that our pipelines are protected, and there are sophisticated technological innovations that are being advanced so that protection is there. I think I've run out of time, but I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have regarding pipelines or pipeline safety.
Thanks, Elaine. So we're going to go next, after we get our slides switched around, to Dr. Heather Bears, who works with Zoetica Environmental Research Services. And Heather and her team has been working with the city on we are going to have questions after all of our speakers. We're going to get through our speakers, and then we're going to do a round that can be directed at any or all of the speakers. So we thought it would be good for you to hear all the perspectives, and you can certainly ask specific questions to any specific speaker. Okay. There we go. Let's go to the next one. There we go. So Heather is a registered professional biologist and founder of Zoetica Environmental Research Services. She has a research background in wildlife biology, ecology, and ecotoxology. I hadn't heard of that one before this bio. Over the past 10 years, she's been involved in providing critical reviews of environmental social impact assessments on behalf of municipal and Aboriginal interveners with concerns about project impacts. She has reviewed and proposed TransMountain Pipeline projects and has provided feedback on topics of concern to the city, and she'll tell you what she found out. Please help me in welcoming Heather Bears.
Thanks, Mark. And if I could ask for a favor, if you could put up the slide with the new Westminster map on it, that would be really helpful, because most of what I'm going to be talking about is going to be contained within that map. That's the one. Yeah, thanks. Just as a preamble to what I'm about to say, if any of you are interested in the detailed questions that the City of New West ended up submitting for their second round of information requests, it's publicly available on the NEB website, and I would encourage you, people who are keen on the subject, to go on there and look at the questions that were asked, and there will be formal responses from Kinder Morgan. We haven't yet seen those responses, but during the course of preparing these IRs, we definitely got a good idea of some of the missing information or questions that we had about the project. So most of my information requests, most of my review was focused around impacts to the City of New Westminster. And so if you see questions that are missing from the broader context, such as things that are happening in Alberta or things that are happening in China, it's not because we're not interested in them. It's actually because the NEB process has constraints about what you can ask. So things that are happening upstream, downstream are kind of off the table. So we have included our information requests in the boxes that we're allowed to ask in. So the first set of concerns that we had was about the appropriateness of this general route. As some of you may know, one of Metro Vancouver's top priorities, as articulated in their Ecological Health Action Plan that came out in 2011, was to ensure the ecological health of the region. 2 of the 12 priority projects that were mentioned in this Ecological Health Action Plan were focused in the Lower and Upper Brunette River. And that's where that sort of narrow stretch of yellow is located. These projects were seeking to increase the base water flows and to restore riparian habitat to improve and increase the habitat for various species of salmon and Nooksack dace, and to enhance the recreational and educational opportunities of the area. So given that 17% of the Ecological Health Action Plan for Metro Vancouver focuses on the Brunette system, the present alignment of the route itself seems in conflict with the goals of this regional plan. It's also, we couldn't find it, that we could not find a detailed riverbank scour analysis for this particular location. It's possible that it got released after we reviewed the information. But given the small tract of land that's available for some of that route, the detailed local analysis may reveal that riverbank structures will be needed. So the first line of defense from keeping oil out of a watercourse is to keep the pipeline as far away as possible. That hasn't been done. So if it's running right along the watercourse, it's very possible that there will be the need for some sort of protective device between the watercourse and the pipeline. This could very well change the flow of the water, which of course is the habitat for the salmon and the Nooksack dace that they're trying to enhance. So we're looking for details of those engineering plans at a local scale to see how they could possibly not interfere with the ecological health action plan of this area. It's also hard to understand how there will not be loss or damage to the 30-meter riparian setback that's required around the Brunette River, given that up to 45 meters is needed for the construction of this pipeline. Pipeline itself is narrower, but there are temporary workspaces and access corridors that are needed. And of course, any spill of bitumen would also threaten the realization of those goals. And finally, the use of this alignment would limit options available to the City of New Westminster and Metro Vancouver for enhancing their recreational corridors, stormwater management systems, potentially, if they wanted to in the future, use this corridor for meeting their integrated stormwater management plan objectives. So we asked quite a few questions about why that particular route was chosen. It also runs along an existing right-of-way along CN Rail, which could create some health and safety issues, which we address later. So we also brought up quite a few questions about impacts to fish and wildlife. To date, many of you know, and the next speaker will be speaking more about this, a substantial amount of money and effort have gone into making improvements to the quality of the Brunette River and Stony Creek to promote salmon spawning and additional habitat enhancements. The current alignment adds risk to the ongoing success of these improvements, which have led to returns of thousands of spawning salmon since 2008. The Fisheries Act prohibits causing serious harm to commercial, recreational, or Aboriginal fisheries. And this project could be an eventual violation of that act. The Brunette River, which you may not know, also hosts one of 4 remaining populations of Nooksack dace in BC. The Nooksack dace is a small fish species that is federally listed as endangered and is on Schedule 1 of the Species at Risk Act. A recovery strategy has been put in place as mandated by the Species at Risk Act, and any malfunction or spill resulting from this project could also put that species recovery plan in jeopardy and potentially violate the Species at Risk Act. The Nooksack dace is particularly sensitive to changes in river conditions that could occur during the pipeline construction and operations if protective riverbank structures are needed, such as riprap along the river, which could change the riffles and the flow. The Brunette River is also hosts a number of additional species at risk, amphibian, mammal, and bird species at risk, including the red-legged frog, western painted turtle, Pacific water shrew, and the Finini subspecies of great blue heron, each of which could also be negatively impacted by any removal or impacts to the riparian habitat or water quality. We're also concerned about the spread and control of invasive species along this corridor, such as Himalayan blackberry and Japanese knotweed. So these 2 invasive species are really common in this area, and they're problematic in that they decrease the habitat quality for endemic species. Clearing of native vegetation and exposure of bare soils, as will be required during the pipeline construction, increases the risk of these invasive species spreading. If they do spread, they'll have to be managed on an ongoing basis, and species like Japanese knotweed cannot be removed by uprooting them. Instead, they need frequent applications of glyphosate, which could enter the Brunette River watershed and impact fauna that use the river. We also had concerns about the pipeline alignment acting as an ecological trap, drawing certain species to attempt to breed in the corridor, only to have those breeding attempts thwarted by semi-regular clearing and spraying of the alignment. Some other concerns that were brought forward was the potential for disturbance of contaminated soils during construction along the Brunette, as there are suspected and known pockets of contaminated soils in the Brunette watershed from past historic industrial activities. The potential for construction-related impacts to traffic flow and access to adjacent locations and businesses. The potential for impacts of the project on surrounding property values, particularly in the Sapperton neighborhood and the Braid industrial areas. We had concerns about how baseline and monitoring data will be used to make decisions about when a preventative repair is needed and when a significant impact has occurred, warranting some adaptive management. We also had major concerns about the level of detail provided in the emergency response plan, such as details about resources available for emergency responses, the time required to respond to a spill, or how liability will be handled when an emergency involves both sea and rail and the adjacent pipeline. Further, we had concerns about the fact that Kinder Morgan is a major shareholder of Western Canada Spill Services, which they propose to use for spill responses. In our view, this could represent a conflict of interest. And it's hard to know if they're the most appropriate spill response team to be using, and they generally work out of Alberta and have some limited presence in eastern BC. So we also raised concerns about how Kinder Morgan reported pipeline failure frequency predictions in their report, as they were subdivided into failures due to separate causes per kilometer per year. So it subdivided everything, rather than reporting it as a collective risk due to all potential causes of failures over larger, more relevant stretches of pipeline. We also had concerns about the temperature ratings for the metals used for the pipelines. Metals will be rated for up to 50 degrees Celsius and down to negative 45 degrees Celsius, which gave rise to concerns about forest fires coming into contact with these materials where they cross over top of rivers, or where extreme environmental events in the future could impact the integrity of the pipelines. And last but not least, we are very concerned with the incomplete spill response plan provided by Kinder Morgan, which they have directly said they have no plans of providing during this process. Cleaning up bitumen is far more complicated and expensive compared to cleaning up lighter crude spills. And Kinder Morgan has stated that they cannot provide the details of their spill response plan, so it's very difficult to evaluate whether it will be effective, how much it will cost, and if it will leave a legacy of other issues in the area. So that's a brief overview of some of the issues that we found. Again, there's far more detail in the document online. It's about 20 pages, so take a look at it. It's publicly available. Thanks.
Thanks, Heather. It was quite a detailed summary that Heather and her team put together, and we'll make that available as well on our website for people, as well as when Kinder Morgan provides responses, we'll post those as well. So Tim was kind of worried because Heather said the next speaker is going to talk about habitat restoration. So Tim, you're not going to speak about that. Don't worry about it. Okay. Chief Armstrong has had 35 years in the fire service and 5 years as a chief in New Westminster, and has dealt with lots of issues, as you probably know, like down on Columbia Street not too long ago, unfortunately. He has a strong background, as I have found out working with him on a number of issues on emergency response and hazmat, hazardous materials response. He's also, for the city, the head of emergency management and does planning for emergency incidents. Please help me welcome Tim Armstrong.
Thank you, Mark. Good evening, everybody. I don't have a lot prepared because, as Heather alluded to, there's not a lot of information available to us. I've been in consultation with my colleagues in Burnaby, and they've run into substantial roadblocks as far as having their Kinder Morgan's emergency response plan shared with them, yet the expectation is that we are going to be part of that emergency response plan. So that's quite troubling to us. The other thing is, chair of the Greater Vancouver Fire Chiefs Association, nobody has reached out to the fire service for any kind of consultation on not only spill response, but emergency response. So as first responders and first to respond to hazmat incidents, I think that information would be helpful to us. So would you agree? And I feel that my job is first and foremost to ask those tough questions on your behalf, even if you don't know the questions to ask, because we do. And we've had a lot of difficulty in getting the right answers, if any answers at all. And we talk about delay times in response. I've responded to many hazmat incidents, not only here locally, but abroad. I was involved in a deployment to Hurricane Katrina, and was in an area called Chalmette, where Murphy Oil had an oil tank breach. And I can say a decade later, that town is still not recovered. And the population was about the size of New Westminster. And the economic impact on that community and the community at large, it devastated it. There was 100,000 barrels of crude oil flowing through the city. And we were rescuing people walking through crude with caustic burns to their limbs, trying to evacuate. So as far as emergency response goes, these spill response agencies are remediation contractors. They're not emergency response contractors. They're not going to set up perimeters. They're not going to evacuate you. They are not going to manage the incident. They're going to come in as a remediation, probably 2 to 3 days after the event. So who manages it in the meantime? We do. So yes, we do have some concerns, and I encourage you to put those concerns forward to me if you have them, and I'll get you the answers. So thank you.
Thanks, Chief Armstrong. Well, I think last but not least, before we get to the important part, which is you, is Elmer Rudolph with the Sapperton Fish and Game Club. Now, Elmer is active in his community, too, in his resident association, but tonight he's here representing the Sapperton Fish and Game Club. He's been a member of the club since 1984 and has been a conservationist, keen conservationist ever since. He joined the club just about the time that salmon came back into the Brunette River after a 30-year absence back in 1969. He took over the position of director of the Brunette River Restoration Project in the 1990s, and I think you saw him on the front cover of the newspaper last week in his hip waders out doing some work. He's out there quite a bit. He's lived in New Westminster for 65 years and is currently president of the Sapperton Fish and Game Club. Please welcome Elmer Rudolph.
Thank you, Mark. Good evening, everyone. And yes, I am a member of the Sapperton Fish and Game Club, which have been the stewards of the Brunette River since 1969. Long time, going back 45 years. For those of you who may not know a great deal about it, approximately half the length of the Brunette River flows exclusively through Burnaby, approximately 1/4 through a shared boundary between New Westminster and Coquitlam, and the final quarter through New Westminster exclusively. The Brunette River empties Burnaby Lake, flows approximately 6 kilometers to the east, and empties into the Fraser River in New Westminster near the Royal Columbian Hospital in Sapperton. For a small river, it has quite a large watershed, beginning up on the top of Burnaby Mountain at the SFU campus, moving west to North Burnaby and the Brentwood area, into East Vancouver, around to Central Park, Metrotown, and back to New Westminster along the Kingsway Ridge. The history of the Brunette River over the last 100 years is like the ride of a roller coaster. A way up, a way down, and all points in between. At the top of the roller coaster, in 1900, the Brunette River was one of the best small rivers in the Lower Mainland for salmon. As a matter of fact, you can find stories in the local newspapers going back to that time about the abundance of salmon seen in the river. At that time, coho salmon, chum salmon, and pink salmon were the historic species. By the 1930s, the Burnett River still had good numbers of salmon, but by the late 1940s, it was in trouble. The trouble began in the Still Creek area north of Burnaby Lake, which is the main spawning area for the river. Post-Second World War industrial development began to see the deposit of heavy metals, the byproducts of industrial processes, along with other chemical pollutants, into Still Creek. So that stressed the spawning salmon when they were coming back to their spawning beds. At the same time, at the bottom end of the river in New Westminster, the lower Burnett industrial area had been polluting the river for decades via outfall pipes disgorging all manner of liquids 24 hours a day directly into the river. That was the double whammy. Pollution in the spawning beds at the top end and pollution in the lower river that the salmon had to swim through to get to the cleaner water. The result was that by 1955, the coho salmon return to the river was 0. We had hit the bottom of the ride. For 14 years, little changed. But in 1969, the Sapperton Fish and Game Club members took it upon themselves to attempt to restore the river to some semblance of what they had known and remembered about it as kids 30 years earlier when they had swam and fished and played in it. But when they approached governments to help them, much to their surprise, they were virtually rebuffed by every level of government, federal, provincial, and even local governments. And industries along the river were also not very cooperative, understandably, because to change their processes was going to cost them a lot of money. They weren't about to do us any favors because nobody had made them do it. And you have to appreciate in 1969, unlike today, terms like ecology, environmental degradation, salmon habitat, habitat destruction, those terms were virtually unknown in the language. Nobody used them, unlike today when they're common. So the Sapperton Fish and Game Club essentially had to go it alone with little or no help, doing what they could to clean it up. And the only advice we received from the experts was that it was a hopeless task. It could not be done. As a matter of fact, they quoted us chapter and verse as to how it couldn't be done, why it couldn't be done. Then in the mid-1970s, we were rescued by a knight on a white charger in the form of the federal government, the Department of Fisheries and Oceans, which had become alarmed at the sharp reduction in the number of coho salmon returning to their traditional spawning rivers on the south coast of British Columbia, particularly the Fraser River. So they created the Salmonid Enhancement Program, known as SEP, whose aim was to recover coho salmon spawning streams, especially those tributary to the Fraser River. The thrust of the program was to help community groups who were interested in their local streams. The community groups would provide the grunt work, and DFO would provide the technical expertise. The Burnett River was a prime candidate, therefore, due to its previous history and its current sad state, and the Sapperton Fish and Game Club's lonely but well-publicized efforts to restore it. So that was the turning point, the mid-1970s. For the Department of Fisheries and Oceans brought along with it the enforcement muscle in the form of the Fisheries Act, which nobody had ever bothered enforcing before. And one of the key parts of the Fisheries Act made it an offense to discharge deleterious substances into fish-bearing waters. And they used that like a club. The lower Burnett industrial area polluters were brought to heel, and by 1980, for about 5 years later, The lower Burnett water quality would support fish life. Juvenile salmonids were planted into the Burnett in 1980, and we received our first adult coho back to the river in 1984. And they have returned every year since then. The experts who had poo-pooed us 15 years earlier now expressed their amazement and said, "How did you do it?" Well, unlike today, when anyone can acquire reams of info on just how to do it, we had no book, no manual. We made it up as we went along, and we just used our common sense. One thing we all learned from the experience was that if the Burnett River, a river wholly contained within a metropolitan area with no real source of clean water, could be brought back, then virtually any river in North America could do the same. And as a matter of fact, we received phone calls from all across North America with the same question: how did you do it? And we simply, over and over again, told our story. Speaking of stories, to shorten a long one, since 1999 and the rebirth of the Burnett River, the Sapperton Fish and Game Club, working with Metro Vancouver, which you might have known previously as the GVRD, and the provincial government, have spent about $1 million to improve the Burnett for salmon, steelhead, and cutthroat trout, all historic Burnett River species. No, we didn't, the Sapperton Fish and Game Club did not spend a large chunk of that $1 million, but we did spend approximately $50,000 of our own money. And we are continuing work on the river to this day. It's still not done. There's still lots to do. The autumns of 2012 and 2013 saw the largest salmon returns in recent history to the Burnett River, approximately 2,800 coho, chum, and pink salmon each of those 2 years. As a matter of fact, spawning salmon returned in tiny streams only 1 or 2 meters wide where they had never been seen before, primarily in Burnaby and around the Burnaby Lake area, much to the delight of hundreds of people who reported to us seeing them. So we now have a valuable community resource, and we are understandably very protective of it. We don't want to lose it again. Which brings us to the proposal by Kinder Morgan to route a new pipeline from Alberta through BC, Coquitlam and Burnaby to their facility on Burnaby Mountain. Their proposed route brings it parallel to the Burnett River, as some speakers have said before me, within a distance varying from 50 meters to 200 meters over a 4-kilometer length. During that 4-kilometer length, where it parallels the river, it would cross 4 or 5 streams, which are all tributary to the Burnett. Any spill near those streams would be potentially catastrophic for the river. Even if it didn't directly impact a stream, a spill could still leach into the river's aquifer, given the proximity of the pipeline to the river. Needless to say, we are very concerned about the pipeline's construction integrity and its safety. The Sapperton Fish and Game Club knows what it is to lose a river and the time and the effort it takes to bring it back. And we don't want it to happen again to the Burnett. In conclusion, the Burnett River has been transformed from a very sorry state 45 years ago into a very valuable asset today in our community. And we are all very concerned for its future well-being. Thank you.
It's an astounding story right here in New Westminster. So thank you very much for that. And thanks to our panel members for bringing your perspectives forward. So now it's your turn, and we want to hear from you. So we have Jennifer, and where did Blair go?
Up here, Mark.
Blair's over there. So again, just to remind you, we have the comment cards. You can put a comment or a question to us, and Blair and Jennifer will bring it down. And Ashley, do we have anything on Twitter yet? Nope. Okay, so people at home, tweet. We're ready for you. And we're going to bring it to a question to any of the panelists, a comment. You don't need to ask a question, or something generally to all of the panelists, but please keep it to about 2 minutes so we can hear from as many people as possible. So let's start up with Blair's side.
Thank you. I wanted to ask a question from the SEPA representative, Elaine. I've been over the last year and a half working with a First Nation in north central BC, the headwaters of the Fraser, and in doing a bit of advisory work and in researching the integrity systems of Kinder Morgan. And I don't know if you're familiar with their integrity system.
Somewhat.
So my question is that there were some spills that occurred in 2013. You're probably aware of Merritt, Coquihalla. So when I researched the source of the issues that might be underlying that in the integrity and the detection systems, it would appear that in 2011, there were some spills and incidents that the NEB asked Kinder Morgan to look into. Now, when I asked some pointed questions about have those issues been resolved, no satisfactory answer. Why I ask about that is that you seem to say there's zero tolerance for spills, and I keep hearing that from Kinder Morgan. I'm not assured at all, given the incidents that happened in Merritt and Coquihalla, that in fact that there is a good integrity system for minor, what the threshold really is to detect what are called minor leaks that could be going on for an extended period of time. If you'd like to comment on that.
Quite a number of integrity systems and integrity management plans are in place for different member companies that belong to SEPA. The goal of zero incident is common, and it's necessary in terms of having that and wanting to perform better. Speaking to Kinder Morgan, I can't really comment on their particular integrity system, but the industry as a whole strives for zero incidents, continuously improving their integrity management systems and in their integrity management plans, and putting better and more advanced leak detection system, technologies such as coding and leak detection devices and corrosion monitoring, inline inspection, and those things. So that's really something that the goal of zero is the ultimate goal. However, it's not as easily achieved by individual companies, but it's certainly an objective, and our member companies are committed to putting that together as a whole.
Great, thank you.
I appreciate that. But how much do we know is actually chronically leaking? Because Kinder Morgan has said, yes, there's a certain level we can't detect. So it's been there since '53, and that's a long pipeline. My question is, does anyone know how much might be going out?
Elaine, is there a record of incidents and where they've occurred and what ongoing problems there are?
There are several records on, the NEB website, as well as, SEPA's website as well. I'd invite you to refer to that in terms of how many incidents or spills there's been throughout that pipeline. We usually report on the membership as a whole rather than one specific company. So I'm not really as knowledgeable as I want to be on Kinder Morgan specifically.
And just a reminder, Elaine is here as an industry representative, and she can't answer specifically, Kinder Morgan's process. I think Andrew has a comment, though.
I have their history in front of me. It's including the spill down the Coquihalla. They've had 7 pipeline spills since 2005 and 2 tank farm spills, one in North Burnaby and one in Sumas. So it's pretty consistent. Some of them were up to 200,000 liters. May 6, 2009, 200,000 liters of oil leaking at the Forest Hill Tank Farm on Burnaby Mountain. Yeah, there's another spill. Now there's around each tank, they have I went up there for an open house. They have they've dug down around each tank so that that spill doesn't necessarily start going down the mountain, but the Burnaby Fire Department were called, emergency service were called for that. So with 60-year-old infrastructure, the integrity has to be questioned.
Okay, great. Anything on this side?
Actually, here's a question.
Okay.
You have a question?
Well, it's a statement and a question, I suppose. We all know that the Chinese have a big investment in Alberta, and there's a lot of oil there, and it's going to go somewhere. And when I was in school, I was always got the impression that the safest way to move millions and millions of barrels of oil is through a pipeline, not by rail and other methods. And anybody that knows this town and has a view of the railroad tracks knows there's a ton of oil being moved on them, okay? My concern is with some of these petroleum cars having a problem rather than pipeline. Pipeline to me is still safer, and Elmer probably remembers at Brunette River, one time a couple kids put a shopping cart on the railroad tracks, it ripped open the fuel tank on a locomotive, and there was about 1,000 gallons of diesel go into the Brunette, and it just snuffed out like 5 years worth of work. And I don't know how long you people have lived around here, but along the stretch of rail track over by Burnaby Lake, how many derailments have there been there in the last, say, 20 or 25 years? I think there's been 3 or 4 of them that I recall. That's more of a concern to me, is the oil that's being moved by rail traffic. And again, along the Fraser River, along the Brunette River, the train tracks are right there. I'm more worried about that rather than a pipeline. A pipeline to me is still a safer way. It's not the best way. Well, I guess it is the best way right now. Unless there's a better way, it's still the safest rather than rail. That's all I got to say.
No, good perspective. Heather brought up something on trains as well. You know, the fact that the train line is running right next to the pipeline, which could cause some interaction as well. So we can't forget the trains in the equation. So, Blair, what do we have over here? We have a question here, Mark.
Mine's not so much a question, it's an observation. The key proponent for the pipeline, Kinder Morgan, has shown in the past through dealing with the people in Burnaby what they think of the public process by having people arrested for lawfully protesting and jury-rigging the GPS components for the pipeline, and ultimately being found, all the contempt of court citations being thrown out. And then even tonight, they don't bother to show up and listen to us. They also show contempt for our fire chief and the Greater Vancouver fire chiefs by refusing to disclose the emergency plans. And I just as a comment, I do find it, I hate to say this, it's pretty hilarious to listen to the pipeline safety person talk about the soft, cuddly intimacy in which all the oil companies work in conjunction with the communities they're involved with, the fire departments on their emergency response plans and all of that, and then 2 speakers later to listen to Chief Armstrong talk about how he's been stonewalled and it's a cone of silence under some national security nonsense to find out any relate to how this is going to relate. And I honestly think this should just be a straight out no, but the way Kinder Morgan's acting, the deal's done. The jig is up. They got the NEB in their pocket. The way the NEB is structured with their questioning and all that, you can't cross-examine, you can't ask legitimate questions. You can only get the information as it's kind of spoon-fed to you from Kinder Morgan, and I don't want them in my neighborhood, and I think, you know, if this goes through, I think you could see it escalating again, similar to Burnaby Mountain. Thank you.
Now, for the record, I think you said they have NEB in their pocket, not the NDP. Yes. It's like, I couldn't quite hear that, so I was wondering about that. Okay, microphone over to Ashley. We have a question from the audience, written question.
The question is, can we trust the NEB to properly guard and regulate the pipeline industry, similar to the trust we had and a faith with Transport Canada when they allowed a US-owned railway operator in Canada with a one-man crew, resulting in the Lac Mégantic oil spill and ensuing disaster? And this is for anyone on the panel.
Any comments from the panel on that? Andrew?
No, of course. In the last 10, 15 years, we've seen a change in our public independent bodies, our government bodies that were set up. That were, when I was, growing up and whatever, they were always there to protect the public interest. That is no longer the case. They're there now to protect corporate, big business interests, and the public interest, it takes a backseat to that. I think that's fairly obvious. The gentleman spoke about this being a done deal. I disagree 100%. This is a pivotal year for this project. We have the courts, we have the support of First Nation challenges, and we have a federal election. And we have to get out the vote in that federal election, and we need a change in government to put the brakes on this project.
Back to Blair, he's up top. Do you have somebody up there?
Well, we have lots of people, and some people down here. I think, Jennifer, you were going to grab somebody in the front row.
Yep.
Okay, well, why don't, Jennifer, you come to your person over here, and so again, if you could let Blair and Jennifer know, eye contact, just like pedestrians on streets. Know who you are.
Hello, my name is Sadie, and I'm a member of the New Westminster Secondary School Environment Club, and so I grew up in Sapperton. I went to Hume Park Elementary School, and I have fond memories of spending time down at the Brunette River. So thank you for all of your work, Elmer. That's really appreciated. I remember in school, actually, we raised young salmon and released them in the stream. We also participated in the shoreline cleanup, and I also remember having some wicked barbecues with my neighbors over here down by the river. So obviously the Brunette River is of great value to our community, and it's important that we protect it, but there's also this greater concern about climate change, that the pipeline represents the expansion of the oil industry, which is not the kind of infrastructure that, as a member of my generation, I would like to be inheriting. Because we are going to see a disproportionate effect on the poor with the increasing frequency and severity of extreme weather events with climate change. I think it's important that as a community and as a city we take a stand to say that this pipeline is not only against the interests of our community environmentally, but also on a larger scale of climate. So my question in general to the people here, to our elected officials here, and to the panel is, what can we do as a city to express our concerns about the climate on this project when the NEB process doesn't allow that to state it directly in our intervener statement?
Thank you, Sadie. So that was an open response. We happen to have some politicians in the audience tonight, so I don't know if any of them want to take a crack at that. No? Okay, they've heard you, though. Anyone on our panel? No. Thank you very much, Sadie. Oh, we have one. Do you want to respond to Sadie?
No, I just want a quick question here. If I can ask it.
Okay, we'll let this one go, but normally we're going to go back and forth. But sure, let's hear your question.
My question will be probably the briefest question here. I have no preliminary. I'm a resident of New Westminster. Have been for 15 years and lived in the Lower Mainland for the last 40 years. My question is for Elaine. Elaine, you had in your slide presentation, you had the life cycle of a pipeline. You had the planning, the construction, the running and the operation and stuff. One thing you didn't have was the death or the end of it. There is obviously, it doesn't last forever. My question is, how long does it last, and how does it logarithmically increase the severity of a spill or the risk factor of a spill as it gets to its death? And what happens at a death? Do they just plug it up?
So pipelines are usually designed a certain life. The design life of a pipeline typically lasts anywhere from 50 to 100 years, depending on material and the product that they carry, the coating that they have. It's similar. So the age of the pipeline is a factor, but typically, like your homes or your cars, maintenance and inspection is a critical factor in the life of the pipeline and in the health of the pipeline. So programs like integrity management programs, inspection programs, and repair and mitigation programs are in place to address those health issues for the pipeline. There are abandonment standards when you abandon a pipeline, whether they no longer run or not have any products going through them, but that's separate from what you have in terms of maintenance. So similar to your health, it's maintenance.
Please include that in your slide.
We will.
There is an end.
Right. Thank you for the feedback.
Great, so pipeline decommissioning, another big factor. So Blair, we'll go up top to you.
Right here.
A short question to Andrew Murray. Just a minute ago, you mentioned that we need a change of government. Now, which government would you prefer? Which government do you think would be the best for this purpose?
Not sure this is directly related to the pipeline issue, so we'll try to make the answer related to the pipeline issue.
No, I think thanks for the question, Vlad, but I'm not going to take the bait on that one. The reason these pipelines have reached this process is because a lack of citizen involvement. When you're only getting 50 to 60% of your population out voting, 40% are staying home. That just makes it easier for the very powerful interests of CAP, the oil and gas industry, to be able to get streamline these projects through the bureaucracy in Ottawa. So until this is just an incredibly pivotal election in October. I mean, we're at a crossroads here. We can allow these projects to go through and lock ourselves into a fossil fuel future for the next 40, 50 years. Or we can do what other countries are already doing. They're weaning themselves off fossil fuels, and they're eliminating the subsidies for fossil fuels. That's one thing that we'd love to see in this country is these are some of the most powerful corporations in the world and richest, but yet we subsidize them to the tune of $34 billion according to the International Monetary Fund per year.
Shame.
Let's put that money in renewable energy and clean technologies. Let's turn the corner for the future of this young woman here that spoke earlier. I mean, we have a choice.
Okay, we're going to go back to Ashley, who has another written question. But she doesn't have a microphone. Now she does.
How will SEPA help Metro Vancouver in the event of a major pipeline breakdown in or near our waterways when Kinder Morgan will not provide information to the local emergency responders who govern SEPA, responders team, and then I guess the second part, who governs SEPA other than the oil and gas companies listed?
Okay, so how will the pipeline industry work with Metro Vancouver emergency responders in a pipeline problem?
We don't have the mandate to really put together a plan to interact with first responders. All I know is that the membership has an agreement in terms of the mutual emergency assistance agreement where public awareness is important. One of the initiatives that we have currently at SEPA is to have the members collaborate on making first responder training and awareness be an initiative.
Oops, excuse me. Wait for the response.
Sorry. So it's a mandate to really inform the public and first responders about emergency response and in case of pipeline incidents as well. So it's a collaborative effort between the members rather than just SEPA itself.
Tim, do you have anything to add from your perspective how it works between the industry and the responders?
Well, no disrespect, Elaine, but the fire service has been proactive and almost demanding representation in emergency response. We have a lot of expertise not only in this community, but throughout the province as far as hazardous materials response. In fact, a lot of our members are also working for remediation companies, and they're called out on their days off to respond to such events and that, which is, you know, for their expertise and training and that. So I've seen a lot of ads on TV the last little while on this TransMountain Pipeline, and if some of that money had been put towards emergency response and the first responder community for training and equipment, I think we'd be better served, and that's.
Great. So Jennifer has a question. Oh, there's a second part to the question, apparently.
Oh, who governs SEPA other than the oil and gas companies listed?
Who governs SEPA? So the structure, I guess the governance structure of the SEPA collaborative.
SEPA is an association. We are funded by our member companies. However, we have a mandate and a mission to ensure safe and reliable operations of pipeline.
Okay, so it's a collaborative governance.
It is.
Okay, great. So we're going up to Blair. Need my sunglasses here. There we go.
Hi, my question is for Elaine. First, I'd like to thank you for being here to respond to our questions from a different point of view, I suppose. And so in your presentation, you mentioned that you mentioned sustainability in the vision of your organization, and also you mentioned how you're concerned about a safe and sound environment. So my first question is, how would your organization define safe and sound environmentally? And also, most importantly, you mentioned how your organization wants to build trust with communities. So how does your organization plan to address the concerns of communities that are not necessarily don't necessarily agree with the practices of your member companies, and as they're not safe and sound environmentally? And I would request if you could please answer that in the light of climate change, especially because, as someone else mentioned before, our generation gives a lot of importance to that. So if you could answer that question in the light of climate change. Thank you.
A couple of questions that I heard from you is how do we characterize safe and sound operations of pipelines? Pipeline operations is governed by a number of regulatory requirements. That's the bare minimum. We're addressing pipeline safety and pipeline performance through our program called Integrity First. And regulatory requirements and compliance is actually the barest minimum of that. So we strive to have, or strive to be better in terms of performance in pipelines, and that concerns socioeconomics, it concerns pipeline safety, and it does concern the environment. When we talk about environment intactness, it would include climate change, it will include noise, water impacts, it'll include habitat, wildlife, and all those things, not just climate change. The second question eluded me. I couldn't remember what it was.
It was mostly directed to that, so because communities don't necessarily view the practices of the member companies as safe and sound environmentally, especially safe and sound environmentally, how does your organization address that?
SEPA is a collaboration. It's a collaborative of member companies. It doesn't speak to one. Companies themselves will have their point of views on what's safe and what's sustainable and all that in terms of the industry. SEPA itself is a voice where it takes into account all the member companies and all that projection, and the mission and our vision is to have a safe and reliable infrastructure and pipelines to deliver products to market.
Elaine, the studies, the guidelines and whatnot that you've prepared, they're available at your website at CEPA.ca?
Yes, I invite you to take a look at our website. It's called aboutpipelines.com.
Aboutpipelines.com.
All the information there.
Great. Okay. Over here.
Hi, thanks very much. I've been a resident of New Westminster for just a little over 60 years now, and Elaine, I really want to thank you for coming into the pit, the den, and standing up to the crowd, or at least contributing what knowledge you have based on your industry. I appreciate everybody's passion in the room against the pipeline. I think that's wonderful. That's Canadian, but the reality is that the oil is going to move somehow, and the option is the rails. And I don't know if any of you spent any time in Fort Langley, but you used to be able to read the name on the train when it went by. In the last 2 years, you can't see the name on those trains. It's just going so fast. Their speeds have increased up to 30%. The volumes have tripled. And as the City of Vancouver just found out, you don't win against the rail lines. They own the right-of-ways. They're going to run what they want, when they want. And I think it's fine to resist and present the opinions, but if the alternative is the rail lines, I think we have to stop and think about the lesser of the two evils. And I would add to that that the TransMountain Pipeline system is aging, and if there was going to be an opportunity, if it does exist, they have the right-of-way, allowing them to put in a new pipeline, maybe to a different capacity, but that pipeline fails, there is going to be a problem. A newer one is much safer than an old one continuing to run. But rail is your other option if we don't do it any other way. And I don't see how you're going to stop the rail lines. CN and CP are far more powerful than any other businesses that Andrew likes to refer to. And Andrew, some of your commentary I would kind of question, but at another date.
Thank you. Thank you for that. Okay, Blair has.
Can I just respond to that? I'd love to respond to that. You know, we're being told that we have to take these pipelines. We're not opposed to every pipeline out there. There is a project out there that kind of makes sense that we could support, and that's the Energy East pipeline, simply because half of our country relies on imported oil. Even though we have this resource in Alberta, half of our country doesn't have access to it, and that's Ontario, Quebec, and the Maritimes. And with the Energy East, at least it's being refined in this country, and at least half of our country would be able to enjoy the benefit of this resource for domestic use. So it's not like we're opposed to every pipeline. And your comments about rail, that's true. There's not a lot of oil coming through right now into this port. It is in other parts of Canada. But again, that's, I guess, local governments taking back control of their own constituencies. Running oil, those are like bomb trains in certain respects. They have the potential to blow like they did in Lac Mégantic. And so, you know, it's about local governments being empowered enough to have their voice heard in Ottawa, and we start making decisions on good science and not ideology.
Okay. Great. A question up top with Blair.
Yes, I'm a student from SFU studying environmental science. When come with doing research, the biggest challenge for us is looking for data through public domain. So my question for Elaine is that how does your organization regulate each member in terms of how much information is required to share with the public or your organization?
CEPA cannot and will not regulate pipeline companies themselves. It's not our mandate. Like I said before, it's a collaboration of all those member companies. We don't have CEPA itself doesn't have the teeth to implement rules or regulations. But we do hold our companies accountable to each other rather than to, you know, to safety and accountability. It's not SEPA dictating what the companies can and will not provide. Those remain under the purview of each and every one of those members.
And the National Energy Board ultimately is the regulator, the people who have the teeth to impose regulations. And this is more of the guidelines created by the industry. And each company, I guess, has their discretion on how they're going to apply those joint guidelines. Would that be fair? Okay, great. Okay, we have some up here, Jennifer. You want to? Oh, you're way up there. Okay, so where are we going over here?
Hello now.
Okay. I know this fellow, Mr. Finn Donnelly.
Yeah, thanks, Mark. Finn Donnelly, Member of Parliament for New West Coquitlam and Port Moody. And thanks. I definitely want to thank the City of New Westminster for hosting this town hall and actually getting feedback from its citizens, and to thank all of our panelists for their comments and expertise. It's been great to hear the comments and hear the questions. Certainly for me, appreciate that. More of a point for Elaine, and again, thank you for coming out. But you talked about trust and building relationships, and you mentioned integrity first. Just using one of the member organizations, Enbridge, and there was reference to TV commercials earlier. Their TV commercials make me think that they could be advertising for green parks or something. You know, it leads to a second part here, which you talked about complying with federal laws, and I think Andrew aptly pointed out that those laws are being weakened and eroded. So while they're complying with these laws, the laws are being changed. So the point here is what this is leading to is increased cynicism. It's the opposite of trust, and that's a big problem. So that's just more of a comment. And the second point to more of the question about what can people do about you know, issues like, for instance, climate change, that you can't even comment because the process has been structured in a way that you can't comment on one of the fundamentally biggest issues threatening the planet. And this issue obviously is something that the collective has to address. So I think what everyone in this room and many others in many other town halls and communities across the country have to do is ask their federal candidates, what are they going to do, what is their party going to do in terms of processes that will consult their communities and allow or strengthen laws, not weaken them, allow for scientists to comment, not muzzle them, and allow for comment on things like climate change. So I think Andrew rightly points out we're in an election year that, you know, sorry to bring the politics into this, but these proposals are driven by politics. So this is an opportunity this year to make your voice heard on processes like this. So keep that in mind.
Thanks, Finn. I have Blair up top with someone.
Yes, Elaine, you seem to be the popular member on the panel tonight. My question's pretty quick. As I listen to you speak, it sounds like SEPA is a lobbying organization. So my question is that the way you would characterize it, as a lobbying organization for your member companies? And if it's not, then how would you say it's different?
Like I said before, we advocate for pipeline safety and pipeline performance rather than advocating for member companies or their projects. We are funded by member companies, although they make us adhere to a mission of ensuring pipeline operations are safe and sustainable according to focus on environment and socio-political environments as well.
So the organization does not lobby for projects. They bring together the organizations to establish guidelines and whatnot. And as we heard earlier, it's up to each company as to how they apply them. I believe we have a Twitter, our first tweet question.
This question is for Heather. What baselines are required for responsible management of Brunette Stony Creek, especially related to SARA listed species?
Sarah is Species at Risk Act.
Okay, for the Species at Risk Act, we'd want to see good surveys done to show what species are occupying the riparian habitat and the watercourse, and we'd want to know where the critical habitat is located prior to any project going through. In terms of surveys, I haven't got too much into the available baseline data, but we want to know that it had been done during relevant seasons where they're going to be. We need more detail about their construction plan as well to know precisely when they're going to be building and what species would be potentially affected. We'd want to know where those species are, where those critical habitats were, and the potential for any effects, what they're going to do to mitigate the effects. And ideally, we'd want to see the baseline data have enough power, have enough data collected on each species to be able to detect a difference, a change before and after, if it is occurring. And that's sort of the problem with rare species, is that they are few in number.
They're rare.
And so you're not going to tend to find a slow decline. You're going to tend to find presence, and then you're going to tend to find absence if something happens. So it's very hard to say definitively beforehand we're not going to affect the species at risk, where there may be very few in an area, and getting sufficient numbers to compare before and after and seeing a decline statistically is very difficult. So you have to kind of, that almost becomes a qualitative assessment where you're looking at habitat effects. So how much habitat is going to be lost?
So we're next to go to Blair. There's a question over there.
Hello, I'm Simona. I'm also from SFU, and I'm also studying environmental science. My question is, it's sort of a two-part question. The first part is primarily for Elaine. I noticed in your presentation, part of the vision of SEPA includes environmental sustainability. It seems to be a very large part of your vision. However, for me, that seems to conflict with the idea of pipelines, because we're extracting fuel, and then that fuel causes it's a fossil fuel, so it causes emissions, and that's not very sustainable for the environment. So I almost get this notion that these oil companies should be trying to go in, they should invest into greener technology. I understand that, we can't make the change overnight from using fossil fuels to using cleaner energy, but I feel like these oil companies should be starting to head in that direction, even a little bit at a time. And then for the rest of the panel, I just wanted to ask, as citizens of maybe not even New Westminster, just Greater Vancouver, what can we do to facilitate that move, that gradual move from fossil fuels and into cleaner energies? Thank you.
Okay, that's a weighty question. So we'll give you each maybe 20 seconds. What's one thing you would do to move us away eventually from fossil fuels over to alternatives?
Several companies are actually doing a number of initiatives in terms of doing cleaner energy. There's technology out there that's a derivative of pipelines and clean technology and clean energy. SEPA itself is not doing anything in terms of creating renewable resources or anything like that in terms of producing any alternatives, but really in support of the companies in our membership for alternative means of sustaining our energy needs in the country.
Remove the subsidies. I spoke about that earlier. Remove the subsidies from the industry that you're trying to wean yourself off of, and apply them to the industries that are going to create the future, a much greener and sustainable future. Clean technology, there's 800 companies now in Canada in clean technology. Despite the gentleman's figures about employment, I read just recently that there's more people working in clean technology than there are in the tar sands, 23,000 at 22.4 or something. It's happening around us. It deserves support, and that's what I would do. I'd remove that subsidies and reapply them.
Okay, Jennifer this front row has a lot of questions, so we'll hand it over to this gentleman.
Thank you. Well, in July of 2005, Enbridge had a spill in Kalamazoo. It ruptured at 5 o'clock in the afternoon, and alarm bells went off in northern Alberta. And they went off for about 17 hours, and people were saying, well, it must be an airlock. Let's just put more pressure in there. And that bitumen spilled for 17 hours into a remote creek. To this day, they're still trying to clean it out of the Kalamazoo River. I mean, this bitumen is a dangerous product. I heard a person speaking about the integrity of the pipeline, and that this TransMountain Pipeline or this pipeline will actually replace a newer pipeline. They're bringing bitumen in to export in freighters from Vancouver. Something that nobody would entertain if there wasn't already a pipeline there that used to service the refineries. The second pipeline is going to, one pipeline will take diluted bitumen to the tankers, and then they will take the dilutant out of it, which is the propellant, which is the chemical that they put in so that it can actually travel in that pipeline. And they'll use the other pipeline to ship it back. So there'll be dangerous chemicals running both ways on that pipeline. So I appreciate the industry saying that they strive for 0 accidents, but then so do the airlines.
Okay. Over to Blair.
Hi. I was very surprised to hear anyone speak in favor of the pipeline. So my question is for the audience, and I want to know how many people are in support of Kinder Morgan's project and how many people are opposed to it. Sure, show of hands. Who's in favor of supporting the Kinder Morgan project? And then who's opposed?
I'm neutral on the issue tonight.
What are we here for?
Okay. Great. Over to Jennifer.
There was a lot of people.
Thank you. This is for Elaine as well. SEPA claims that they get together, these pipeline companies, and they're concerned with safety. So I should imagine then they have talked about spills in the past and what has caused them. And I'm wondering, I just listed here what I think could be some causes, and I'd be interested to hear you comment on it. Like, is it cheap materials? Is it poor maintenance? Is it aging structures? Is it insufficient inspection, or is it sabotage? In other words, I'm asking you, what were the major causes of these spills, and why did they happen?
There's several causes of pipeline incidents. It's not anything specific. Age is a contributing factor, corrosion, inspection. There are statistics on our website that kind of put the root cause of those incidents. From what we've gathered as data that the member companies have reported to the NEB when they do their root cause analysis. So I'd invite you to take a look at those. Like I said, there's a number of factors that contribute to incidents.
Are there any that stand out? Like, is there a number 1 and a number 2 cause?
My understanding is in the United States, it's typically third-party damage. Here, it's primarily corrosion. So corrosion and environment, the soil, the coating, and all that. So inspection is a good way to mitigate some of that, as well as good coating advances in coating technology and corrosion inhibition.
Right. I think Elmer had a comment as well.
Yes, on the subject of pipeline safety, about 18 months ago I was invited by Kinder Morgan to a workshop in Burnaby, and it was about the the construction, the proposed construction of the pipeline that we're basically talking about tonight. And it was basically a public relations exercise, and they just told us how many hundreds of groups they'd met with and how many thousands of meetings they'd held and all the rest of it. But we tried to get down to some basics, and we talked. I said, what constitutes a modern pipeline? Well, we're going to build a modern pipeline. Well, what does that mean? We're going to build a modern pipeline. Well, we're going to build it to modern standards. Well, what does that mean? Well, the steel is going to be thicker, and there'll be more shut-off stations. And I said, well, that's it? Like, it's going to be, the steel's going to be thicker and there'll be more shut-off stations? Well, yeah. Well, my reaction was, you know, we can send men to the moon, we can send rovers to Mars. We have the most fantastic communication system in the world with modern smartphones. We have automobiles that are almost ready to drive themselves via computers. We cannot somehow build a pipeline that can't warn someone that something's gone wrong until, as Chuck says, it's spilled umpteen thousand barrels over 17 hours into the river. How is that possible? Well, I didn't get much of an answer. And so I said, well, what about double pipelines? If you went past a very environmentally sensitive area, why not have a double pipe, one inside the other? And the outside one would be the safety pipe. Well, that would be expensive. Yes, and your point is? And I said, well, and what about putting monitors, electronic monitors, inside this pipe for every 100 meters or 200 meters or whatever it would be, so that the moment the inside pipe started to leak oil, you wouldn't wait until it lost 10,000 barrels of oil before some alarm went off. You'd know immediately. As soon as some of that oil started to leak and there were sensors in the bottom of that outside pipe, they would detect this immediately. There's something wrong. We have a slow leak on this inside pipe somewhere. Well, yeah, we could look at that. We could think about that. I just don't understand it. I don't understand how in this day of modern technology, how someone can't make, as they made the tankers double hull after the Exxon Valdez catastrophe, they made them double hull the tankers. Why doesn't somebody have the jam to say, this is how you're going to build it, this is how it's going to be safer, you're going to use modern technology, and you're going to make this pipeline safe? And I was not able to get an answer.
Go back to Blair up top.
Just on the, if you did get an answer, and that we're satisfied that that there was going to be an acceptable risk, and we all know that there's an acceptable. This language, this rhetoric, where I hear that there's going to be a catastrophe, and this would be catastrophic. It would be absolutely catastrophic. I mean, Chuck, you mentioned that you airplanes, they go down. Well, you know, my family go on airplanes. They're the most important thing in my life. But they go on airplanes. They travel for recreation, and those planes, very, very rarely, once in a while, they go down, and it would be catastrophic. It would be the worst thing in my life that could possibly happen, 10 times worse than your river getting flooded with oil. But I'll let my family go on those flights, on those planes, because I know that there is an acceptable risk. So I don't fall for scaremongering that you go into a plane and it could be a catastrophe. I say, no, it's an acceptable risk where you go. So you are saying that you would, presumably, that if your concerns were addressed, some sort of sensor system, something like that, then you would find this to be an all right project. Is that correct?
No, I didn't necessarily say that, because there were a lot of people at this workshop that had different views about pipelines and whether they were acceptable or not. But we got into the subject. Someone else raised the subject of pipeline safety. So we got into the discussion of pipeline safety and what does Kinder Morgan consider to be a safe pipeline. And that was That was how this discussion came about. It wasn't the fact that there might be a catastrophe and what are the risks of that catastrophe happening. It was simply about how could you build a safe pipeline, or a pipeline that's considerably safer using today's technology. And they were very evasive about that. That's all I can say.
Okay. So, Jennifer, it's just this front row again. It's just really active tonight.
It's a noisy front row. Judy Darcy, MLA. I want to thank the city and all the panelists for coming out as well, and especially everybody here for coming out on a rainy night. I want to respond specifically to what Sadie asked earlier, and other people have asked about, which is what can citizens do? So certainly we have a federal election coming up. Our city has played a strong leadership role, as have other municipalities in the Lower Mainland. I want to also suggest that the provincial government needs to take a little heat on this, and because we have a provincial government that has essentially handed over, hook, line, and sinker, if I can use a fishing analogy, has essentially handed over power and responsibility completely for an environmental review process to the Stephen Harper government. And that's not acceptable. So my colleague, the official opposition spokesperson on the environment, a few days ago reiterated what he had been saying earlier and we've been saying for some time, which is that it's unacceptable for our provincial government to abandon its responsibility to the federal government, and if anything has underlined it, I mean, first they wouldn't let us talk about climate change and ask questions about that, and now you're not allowed to, you know, Kinder Morgan gets away with not having to answer questions on what its spill response strategy would be. So I want to suggest that we also tell the Premier and the Environment Minister that it's time for British Columbia to say, we're getting out of that process, it's illegitimate, and we're going to be the ones that take responsibility for evaluating what's in the best interests of the people and the environment in the province of British Columbia.
Thank you, Judy. Thank you for that. Blair has someone up top again. Oh, this fellow's familiar too.
Yeah, Peter Julian, MP for Burnaby New Westminster, and I'd like to thank everybody for coming out tonight, as well as our panelists. And I only have three things to say. First off, I'm the intervener for the official opposition NDP caucus, and so as part of the process through the NEB, we have put forward a cross-examination of Kinder Morgan on a whole range of issues, including their environmental assessments, including the lack of a safety plan, including the lack of economic benefit on Kinder Morgan. If you want to get a copy of our cross-examination of Kinder Morgan, you have just to contact my office at peterjulian.ca. The second point, this has come up a number of times tonight. The clean energy industry worldwide is now worth $1 trillion. It's growing to $3 trillion by the end of this decade. And Canada is getting virtually nothing out of what is a worldwide clean energy boom. So we can take advantage of that, and we start, I think, by taking $1 billion away in subsidies that go to the very profitable oil and gas sector, and we put that into clean energy so Canada can start catching up to countries around the world that are benefiting from that. And my final point is this: Stephen Harper has gutted the process around the NEB. What he's done is eliminated any meaningful public participation. He's eliminated environmental assessments. But he's too clever by half, because one of the things that he did was give the cabinet final approval on anything that runs through the NEB process. Now, if you know the schedule for the NEB, they will be putting forward a recommendation in November of 2015 after the next federal election. That will go to cabinet. Mr. Harper has given the ability of cabinet to make the final decision on TransMountain, on Kinder Morgan. So too clever by half. What he's actually done is given the opportunity to Canadians to choose a new government in October of 2015 and have cabinet make a different decision in January of 2016.
Thanks for that, Peter. We have a question over here, I think. Yep.
Hi there, my name's Peter. I'm another SFU student here at political science, and I've lived in Saperton for 22 years now, and I go running down by the Brunette River whenever it's not freezing or pitch black. And so I think a lot of people here care about the environment, the Brunette River, pipelines in general, and a lot of us are wondering what we can actually do, because the fact is we feel generally powerless. And I mean, yes, we can vote in fantastic people like Judy, Finn Donnelly, Peter Julian. I think New Westminster has done a fantastic job in that regard, because they obviously care. I mean, they're here tonight. But I want to know what else we can do. And you know, also, can New Westminster actually play a role? I mean, is there a role to play? Can New Westminster say, no, we don't want this? Can New Westminster stop it or delay it? Or what? I mean, we all care, but what can we do? And that's to anyone on the panel, that's to anyone on of our elected officials, but as citizens, what can we do?
I'll respond to that first of all. Litigation will delay the process. The courts, I think, are an avenue for us, not just for First Nations. I think there's huge public safety issues. I spoke earlier about the tank farm. You know, we live in a pretty crazy world. There's 3.6 million barrels of raw bitumen being stored there on the side of a hill in an earthquake zone. And in today's world, that would be a pretty inviting target for a terrorist attack. I mean, the repercussions of that, I mean, we cannot discount that possibility anymore. And that is just a huge public safety issue that I think in a courtroom, I think we could win that. You know, and so litigation in the courts, I think local governments, First Nations, we can delay these projects and delay every day we delay, the business case for them starts to unravel. At $40, $50 a barrel, are they making money? No, they're not. It costs about $85, $90 the break-even point for tar sands oil. So it's we play the long game, essentially is what I'm saying to you.
Any other comments? Okay, I see the energy in the room starting to fade just a little bit, so maybe we'll take a few more and then we'll ask, does everyone still have those feedback forms? We'd like to also get those back from you. So Blair, let's take one from the back.
Hi, so after spending time for the last month around Westridge Marine Terminal, there's quite a few things that look like the potential for an accident. Particularly at the end of the pipe where the tankers fill up, there's a very rusty section of the pipe with an orange tarp-like contraption underneath. Who do I contact about that? Because even though we're talking about the potential or the proposal of the twinning of the pipeline, there's an existing pipeline that diluted bitumen is traveling through and tankers that are traveling at night in the fog. And it just doesn't seem like a safe situation spending any time there. So who do I contact that would actually look into that and hold Kinder Morgan accountable if it's not a safe situation?
Tim, do you have any idea if it's a matter of public safety, what would be the agency that people would contact?
Well, there's a number of different agencies, Emergency Management BC, if it was an event that took place, Transport Canada regulates, rail movement. We also have the Ministry of Environment for spills and spill response. But again, there's no, the simple answer is there's probably not, until something happens, there's no one agency that really regulates the potential for an accident. And again, I get back to the fact that the authority having jurisdiction, the local government, and that's why they have a fire service in their community. And again, our mission is life safety first, protection of your property, and protection of the environment. That's our mandate, and we're not for profit. So again. But we are very much underfunded. We're, to create those partnerships and utilize the expertise that the fire service could bring to this would be helpful to all communities. So.
Thanks. Okay, Jennifer.
I just want to point out that we don't need the tar sands. As Peter also pointed out, that we can evolve past the fossil economy if we invest in climate solutions. I just want to share Dr. Amory Levins' information on this critical point. He says that climate solutions are profitable, not costly, as saving fuel costs less than buying fuel. So he says that raising global energy productivity by just 2% a year would stabilize carbon emissions. Raising it by 3% a year would stabilize climate. So he says that energy efficiency, the main tool for profitable climate protection, could actually do the whole job if pursued to its modern potential. Then he also has a study called Small is Profitable on Decentralized On-Site Renewable Energy. So I'm proposing, and you know, when people don't know that there are alternatives, then they're going to go for pipelines. So I'm proposing that New Westminster include Dr. Levins' information in the our National Energy Board presentation, and also that New Westminster publicize and pursue in our city operations and our infrastructure those principles, energy and resource efficiency. And of course, those solutions apply to not only oil, but coal, gas, and also waste to energy. We can stop that incinerator. You know, the Burnett River, the first ash dump was at the confluence of the Burnett and the Fraser River. So, you know, there's going to be a lot more pollution from that stuff. So anyway, we have more control over the incinerator. I'd like to encourage everybody to call their city council and also the Metro Vancouver. But the main thing is the climate solutions are the solutions to all of the fossil and the critical stuff we can create. Not only renew our economy, but also create a future for our children.
All right, thank you for that. So, we have one more tweet, and for all those of you who are watching our live stream, thank you very much for your participation. We have one more tweet coming.
Do the interested panel members have any specific yes-no items with regards to acceptable risk that Kinder Morgan could respond to?
Okay, that's a loaded one. That's, Heather wants to start.
I can touch on that. Some of the structures you were mentioning, Elmer, they do exist. The automatic shut-off valves that can be put on either side of a river that detect a drop in pressure of oil and actually do shut off a pipeline. Those exist. And I think the analogy of the flight was a bit, I sat here and mulled it over for a bit, and I've come to the conclusion that if you found out your family was in a crash, but you found out that that airline was not doing everything it could to make that plane as safe as it could, while its shares are going up and they're making profits because of the minimization of those safety protocols on the plane, I think you would feel the same degree of anger and cynicism that people are feeling looking at some of the pipeline construction processes where they know that these things are available, but it is a matter of profit and keeping shareholder growth moving upwards, and people know that that's at the expense of some degree of acceptable risk that they need to take on. So
just as motivated by profit, totally motivated by profit, but they're properly regulated. And that's the concern that I have, and that's the concern that we should be having here, making sure that they're properly regulated. As the gentleman talked about, I don't want to see oil coming down in trains. I want to see it in pipelines. I want to see it in safe pipelines, and it's going to be there. The global warming issue is another huge issue that I'm also concerned about, but it's not this issue. And I think that we know that they're motivated by profit. There's no question about that. But safety can be motivated by profit, like the airline industry and other industries. Except this building could fall down on us. It's not going to. I don't think it's going to. But it was built and motivated by profit. Well, maybe not this building motivated by profit. and that's the concern that we need. And that's when I think this type of group can be a helpful group in raising those those issues, raising the issues that you've raised, we can be very, very helpful and hold their feet to the fire. But that, you know, I think we have to see what is the acceptable risk and how can we ensure that that's going to be held to. And climate change is this issue too. Climate change is this issue.
Okay.
Climate change is next fall.
Okay, we're going to have some interesting discussions like this out in the lobby after. But what we want to do is to wrap up. There's, I think, a couple more people who haven't had any questions yet, so we'd like to hear from those people. People who have not had their question yet who want to make a point. So we got one up here, and then we'll finish.
Mark, we were going to say, if anybody else that has a question that hasn't asked, please put your hand up now, because I know there's a couple of people that have had a question but would like to just ask a follow-up. So have you not asked a question, but you would like to ask one? You, sir.
And there's a gentleman up there who is not had an opportunity.
I had not planned on a question so much as taking this safety thing to Vancouver Harbor, and where you have all these ships of different kinds, private and commercial, using that harbor, and then you're going to have the oil company ships coming in and out and in and out and in and out, because the pipeline should go through if it's done safely. However, you get into the harbor, and with all the airplanes taking off and landing and all this activity I just mentioned, you still have no safety system, because Jelly Belly has closed the Kitsilano Coast Guard station, where people are trained to make sure things are safe and can enforce them. Get rid of Jelly Belly.
Okay, on that note, we just have a few minutes left, and we wanted to wrap things up now. For those of you who have other comments to make, we have those feedback forms, and we do encourage you to take a few minutes and provide those on the way out, drop them off on the way out. And of course, on there is also contact information. But we're going to now have some final remarks from Mayor Jonathan Cote.
Well, I'd like to thank everyone in this room for participating in this town hall. In particular, I'd like to thank every member of our panelists here. I think we received a lot of really interesting information from a variety of different perspectives. So if we could all give a round of applause for everyone on the panel. I also need to give a big thank you to everyone who came out tonight and participated with their comments and their questions tonight. I think what I've really taken out of here is number one, that there's a lot of concerns about the issues with the pipeline expansions, both local concerns right here in New Westminster, but also many global concerns. The second takeaway I get is I'm hearing that there's frustration with the process, and that people are feeling disconnected and not feeling that they are part of the decision-making process. So I think there were a number of questions as to, well, what can we do next? And you know, certainly the City of New Westminster in hosting this event is trying to raise the profile of this discussion, but the parameters that we're under and our input is fairly narrow. And that's where I want to give the challenge back to everyone in this room. If you care about this issue, if you're passionate about this issue, and you're worried about both the local concerns, both the global issues like climate change, then this discussion needs to move outside of the theater, but out into the community and out beyond the borders of New Westminster to a much larger conversation. So thank you very much for attending here tonight and being a part of this town hall.
And a big thank you. And there's all sorts of ways you can get to, if you wake up tonight and thought, I should have told them about that. Okay, there's lots of ways to get in touch with us, not to mention the fact, if you go to our homepage, there will be a direct link, and from there you can send us more feedback. Thank you. Have a safe trip home.